The Evanston Plan Commission will come to order. We have a quorum. All members of the commission are present. I'd like to welcome Barb Puda, our newest member. Welcome, and we're pleased to have you join us. Is there a motion with respect to the minutes of the April 13th meeting?
Move to approve the minutes of the April 13th meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. The minutes are approved. We are here after a continuance was requested by Nina Paleologos at the last meeting. She is an interested property owner who lives within the specified 500 or 1,000 foot range that's listed in our rules. And so she was entitled to request a continuance for the purpose of making a presentation. Persons living in that range and others who are opposing the proposal can make a presentation tonight. We've allotted 60 minutes for the presentation. We are allowing evidence that is relevant to the standards, and we are not allowing evidence that is not relevant to the standards. Some questions have come up with respect to whether the City Council has the authority to adopt a plan unit development similar to what was proposed tonight, and the question arises in connection with the 1961 ordinance. The Law Department has opined that councils can't bind their successors generally, and in this case, anyone who wishes to contest the question of whether the council has authority to adopt the proposed plan unit development is invited and asked to submit legal briefs on the question to the Planning and Development Committee and to the Law Department. And I'm sure if such briefs are presented, the Law Department will provide an opinion to the council with respect to their authority. After opposing testimony has concluded, applicants may cross-examine all persons who have testified in opposition. The applicants then may rebut evidence of persons who opposed the proposal. The rules provide for re-examination and additional testimony consistent with the rules. Staff report, if any, cross-examination by applicant and interested parties opposing the request, and questions may be addressed by both parties to staff if they make a report. Then we have a summary closing by petitioner, summary closing by interested persons, and the rebuttal by petitioner. The rules provide that testimony and evidence which is cumulative, repetitious, or harassing, or irrelevant should be disallowed, and we will follow those rules tonight. Ms. Paleologos, please proceed.
Thank you so much for hearing us. We represent the Northwest Evanston neighbors, and just so that everybody understands who that is, it's a group of neighbors who live in the area surrounding the Presbyterian Home Corporation land that's in Evanston.
We have just for a minute. I forgot. The testimony has to be under oath in this proceeding. Anyone who's planning to testify, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm you will tell the truth and the whole truth?
Do. So we have a petition that's been signed by well over 100, about 150 residents that live in the surrounding area who oppose the corporation, the Presbyterian Homes Corporation Planned Development submission. I'm Nina Paleologos. I live at 3044 Grant, which is right at the corner of Grant and Lawndale, right across the street from the northeast corner of the Presbyterian Homes property. I've lived there for 21 years, so I am in a unique position to have watched the development of this property cumulatively over that period of time.
Did you say you had a petition you wish to present?
Petition? Not at this time.
Okay.
I'm going to go over a summary, an outline of our presentation. We're going to talk to you a little bit about the overview of the current situation, introduce you to our neighborhood, address the extreme length of the construction schedule proposed by the Presbyterian Homes Corporation, and discuss various Evans City ordinances, including 11061 and 68093. We will discuss the covenant that was entered into between the City of Evanston and the Presbyterian Homes Corporation.
You have a copy of the covenant. I have not seen anything
We do.
in the city
We have
records.
copies of the ordinances for you. And
I asked if you're going to discuss a covenant, do you have a copy you wish to present? If you
We do.
don't have
We
a
have-
copy, we can't take it.
we're getting to that. It's
If you're
right-
going to talk about a covenant, we need the covenant in the record.
It is in the record, sir. We're going to get to it in just a
I'm
minute.
sorry. Please don't speak about the covenant unless you wish to put one in the record.
Okay. We'll put it into the record now. Thanks, Virginia.
Our contention is that the covenant is derived in part from these two ordinances.
Could you identify yourself for the record, please?
Sure, Virginia Mann, M-A-N-N, of 3004 Normandy Place in Evanston.
Are there 9 copies?
Yes, there are.
Virginia, is it your testimony that what you're referring to as a covenant are ordinances 110-61 and 680-93?
Yes,
And there's no other documentation or indication of covenant other than those two ordinances?
right.
You may proceed.
So we will discuss the covenant that Ms. Mann just handed out to you that was entered into between the City of Evanston and the Presbyterian Homes Corporation for the benefit of the neighbors who are third-party beneficiaries of that covenant. We'll address how the applicant's proposal is a violation of these ordinances and the covenant, and we will discuss the applicant's proposal and show how it fails to meet the requirements set forth in the City of Evanston Municipal Code. You'll hear how the City of Evanston has consistently taken steps to protect the character of our community, that the City of Evanston has consistently insisted that there be no garages or structures built on the corners of that property, of the appellant's property, that the City of Evanston has created a covenant on behalf of the neighbors that we feel cannot be violated.
Ma'am, I urge you to submit a legal brief in support of your contention that there is a covenant, since the claim is not consistent with the opinion given to us by the law department. You
Well,
can
we will-
proceed. I just
we will
urge
do
you
that.
to-
All right.
This body
Okay.
is not here to make legal conclusions and
Right.
not authorized for that
But-
purpose.
but-
So-
Something you do.
We were going to present our rebuttal of the proposed plan, which was presented across a number of hours, actually, in March and April by the Presbyterian Homes Corporation, so we'd like to be able to proceed with that. And we'll get to all the specifics in a few minutes. We'll explain how the proposal violates Ordinance 68093 regarding the approved use of the land, and that Ordinance 68093 reinforces the longstanding law that no garages or other structures may be built in certain sections of the property. The proposal violates Ordinances 11061 and 68110 that state that the intensity of use should observe limits as to maintain the character of the neighborhood. The intensity of use of the Presbyterian Homes Corporation planned development does not observe limits so as to maintain the character of our neighborhood. The proposal violates City of Evanston Municipal Code for planned developments, and I'm going to go through the numbers and letters for the record so that it's audible in the record. 68110, the section on general conditions, Part A and B. 6363, the section on public benefits, Parts A, B, C, E, and G. 6364, the section on general provisions, A. 63510, the section on the standard for special use, sections C, D, F, H, and I, and the section on standards, 6369. So a little bit of background about how we got here. And so from the neighbor's perspective, and what our recollection is that in 2008, 2009, the Presbyterian Homes made a presentation to the neighbors on their property. Many neighbors objected quite strenuously to a number of the aspects of this planned development. We really heard nothing after that. We had been told at those meetings that the Presbyterian homes would readdress some of the issues that we had raised. We heard nothing after that until March of 2011, when signs went up on the Presbyterian home property, and there was a presentation made by the Presbyterian homes to this Plan Commission. A number of residents in the area and neighbors were present at that meeting and objected. There was another meeting in April of 2011. The Plan Commission at that time heard further testimony from the Presbyterian Homes Corporation, but also heard a number of other neighbors, many of whom are in the room tonight, who objected to this plan. We requested a continuance, and the chair of the Plan Commission suggested that the Presbyterian homes and the neighbors meet to mitigate the situation. The Presbyterian homes in May, just about a week ago or so, held a meeting with the neighbors in which there was no effort to mediate or mitigate the situation. Essentially, there was just a reiteration from the Presbyterian Homes Corporation employees and CEO and the contracted people that have drawn up the plans and done their landscaping and drawings and things to reiterate their previous presentations with absolutely no effort to mitigate or compromise in any way. A number of us asked if we were going to do that evening, and we were told specifically that that would not happen, that they were going to listen and not do anything other than that, and that they would listen this evening, and then they would think about what we all said and go back to the drawing board. That's what the architect said to us directly. We encourage you to vote no on the Presbyterian Homes Corporation plan development. I'm going to introduce Karen O'Brien, who will offer evidence to rebut testimony given by the applicant.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Karen O'Brien. I grew up at 3020 Normandy and have lived for the past 18 years at 3033 Normandy. My husband is also a
So
lifelong
Brian, are you
resident.
testifying under oath?
Well, I raised my hand when you asked us to earlier.
That's what I'm asking.
Yes, I did.
Thank you.
The Presbyterian homes passed out information about neighborhood housing values, and they list the housing prices ranging from $388,000 to $700,000 and $700,000. But we feel that these examples are not housing prices that are in the area most affected by their projected proposal. The area most affected is on the east side of the Presbyterian home: Normandy, Payne, Grant, and Central Park.
Let me go back to the prior slide. I'm just trying to clarify for the record. What's the source of the information?
It's from the Presbyterian home's presentation, so I assume it's from city records
Thank you.
of recent house sales. Most of the homes in the affected area, the area we feel will be most affected by their proposed project, were built in the 1920s and 1930s. The housing styles are varied. There are no teardowns or McMansions. The houses are gracious, high value. The area is low density, single-family homes. These homes are consistently upgraded and very well maintained. They have high property tax. The most recent sales in the area are as follows. 3045 Normandy, which is the corner of Normandy and Lawndale, right across from the project, was sold for $1.2 million.
Could you explain the source of the information you are presenting?
The homeowners.
Thank you.
3039 Normandy Place, which is just one door east of Lawndale, sold for $1.2 million. 2950 Payne, just east of Central Park, sold for $975,000. 3042 Payne, or Normandy, the corner of Normandy and Lawndale, sold for $1.2. 3025 Normandy, also sold for $1.2 million. The people in the area are long-term residents. There's very little housing turnover in this area. 3015 Normandy, the neighbors, my next-door neighbors, have lived there for more than 25 years. A few doors down, the neighbors have lived there for more than 30 years. The neighbors across the street have lived there for 36 years. Homeowners in our community make an investment for life. Prior to the current family, the woman who lived next door to me was there for almost 60 years until her death. There have been only a few properties for sale recently, and the prices go up to $1.7 million. Our neighborhood is full of beautiful houses with high property values. It's a stable neighborhood, very little turnover. We want to protect our neighborhood. We are the most heavily impacted by the Presbyterian Homes proposal. Our neighborhood is very different from the houses that they presented in their housing description. Our home values are significantly higher than you are led to believe. Their proposal clearly does not maintain the character of the neighborhood as required in Ordinance 63510, 11061, and 68093. Please vote no.
Good evening. My name is Laura Friedland. I'm addressing Ordinance 63510, Construction Schedule and Impact on Property Values. I live at 3025 Normandy Place. I did raise my hand and took the oath earlier.
Thank you.
I moved to the neighborhood about 4 years ago, where we bought our lovely home at the peak of the market and invested our life savings in this wonderful, quiet neighborhood, having no idea that any construction was planned until about a month ago. What I want to point out to you first is the construction schedule that is part of the Presbyterian Homes Corporation proposal that they have submitted. This is a 20-year construction schedule, unprecedented and absolutely unacceptable. If I can just point out here, well, I can try. This section here, I'll read it to you. Phase 1, construction of 6 cottages, spring 2012 to spring 2013. Phase 2, construction of 6 cottages, spring 2014 to spring 2015. Phase 3, construction of 6 cottages, spring 2016 to 2017. Phase 4, construction of 6 cottages, spring 2018 to 2019. Phase 5, construction of 36-unit building, spring 2020 through winter 2021. Phase 6, construction of 6 cottages, spring 2022 to 2023. Phase 7, construction of 6 cottages, spring 2024 to 2025. Phase 8, construction of 6 cottages, spring 2026 to 2027. Phase 9, construction of 6 cottages, spring 2028 to 2029. And Phase 10, construction of 6 cottages, spring 2030 to 2031. What this means is that a child born at the time that construction begins will go to college before construction ends, never knowing the peace and tranquility that characterizes this neighborhood now. This 20-year construction schedule will decrease property values, hinder sale of property, damage quality of life for neighbors and Presbyterian home residents, create constant construction traffic, and negatively impact the environment. Just in terms of decreased property values, who would want to move into a neighborhood where there is 20 years of construction? A realtor showing the home, if someone comes to see one of the homes and says, oh, I see construction up the street, how soon is that going to be over? To be told 20 years, who's going to buy a house in that neighborhood with 20 years of construction going on? The removal of trees has an environmental impact. The water table, noisy, dusty. Just imagine, if you will, for our neighborhood, this means 20 years of dust, 20 years of the beep, beep, beep of construction equipment, 20 years of constant construction traffic, 20 years of negatively impacting the environment and our neighborhood. We ask you to vote no. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question? Would you expect the construction to go on 12 months a year for 20 years? Would you expect the construction activity to go on 12 months every year for 20 years?
You're asking me?
Yes.
All I can go by is what their schedule indicates, and the schedule indicates yes.
Okay, thank you.
That's what it says by their schedule.
It says spring to spring.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just have, just two questions. With regards to the Ms. O'Brien and Ms. Friedland?
Yes.
Could both of you just give a little bit of background about your training, expertise, and qualifications with regards to the opinions that you're rendering with regards to the diminishment in property values as a result of the project, similar to the witness that was called by Presbyterian Homes. I believe that they called an appraiser. Could you both just touch on just your background and qualifications? I understand that you own homes in a neighborhood, but could you shed some light on that? That's my first question. My second question is, do you have any data or any information with regards to property values, for example, along Sheridan in Evanston, associated with the roadway improvements and sewer improvements that have taken place in that area, and has there been, I guess, similar negative impacts on values?
That's the infrastructure. What
Well,
does that have to do?
no, I don't have that data, but I don't believe that's a 20-year project.
Okay, can we just, the board is not acting adversarially. We're just trying to get information, so if the general public has comments, they're welcome to make them, but we're all actually acting very cordially, respectfully, and civilly. So we'd appreciate it if those in the gallery wish to say something, that they sign in and do, but please don't speak out of turn, and please don't shout out your comments. That would be greatly appreciated. So if you could just, I'm just trying to get information, so.
Okay, I am not a professional architect or planner or realtor. I recently, 4 years ago when I bought this house, I sold another house, and I've been through the process, and that's as close as I come to having firsthand knowledge of that selling and buying process. It's quite a learning experience.
Okay. And I'm not accusing anyone of, I just would like to understand what your background is, okay? That's why I'm asking.
That we worked in a large group of neighbors who, and our group included legal expertise as well as other expertise, so that I don't claim to have all the expertise for this presentation.
And I think the information I presented was just as a concerned citizen whose life would be affected by the proposal. I've lived in the area my whole life. I'm speaking for other people who gave us information as to their housing values. I'm not contesting that the information the Presbyterian gave you was valid. I'm sure it is, but we don't feel that it reflects the area that will be affected by the project. And that's the information we gave you, which was given to us by the homeowners who are mostly part of this group too, concerned citizens.
Let me ask the board to hold questions until the end of the presentations and then to question the objectors. And the proponents and petitioners can do the same at the end of the presentation. I may interrupt to see if the testimony is pertinent, but other than that, I won't ask questions.
Either way is fine with me, but before I begin my section of the presentation, let me introduce myself, and I did take the oath. Again, I am Virginia Mann. I live at 3004 Normandy Place in Evanston. I'm a 15-year resident. I'm a public relations executive, and I happen to be a former realtor, by the way, but I did want to point out that, as Karen mentioned, we have worked with attorneys, realtors, architects, and all kinds of other professionals who live in our community and are part of our organization. We just happened to select a small group of individuals to speak tonight in order to save time and operate efficiently. But we have input from lots of professionals. But I will point out to you that nothing that they were talking about really was weighed much on opinion, unless it was very obvious, such as no one would want to buy a house in construction traffic at the high end of the market. But most of what we are doing is presenting you with facts. And a lot of them are facts based off of what, in response to what the Presbyterian Homes Corporation presented to you over the last 2 months. And so that is our goal. So let me move on to my section. I want to start by talking a little bit about the history because I think it's very critical to our discussion here tonight. According to their own history, the Presbyterian Homes was first established, quote, to create a home for older Presbyterians with limited financial means. My, that has certainly changed, hasn't it? But that's a topic for another day. The Presbyterian Homes opened in Evanston in 1922 when Geneva Place welcomed its first residents. Since then, there have been constant additions to the property. The McGraw Care Center, Kimball Fitness Center, Elliott Chapel, Huss Pavilion, Calvin Apartments, 1 Arbor Lane, 2 Arbor Lane, cottages and garages on the west side, cottages on the east side, garages in the center of the cottages on the east side. So what I want to do is talk a little bit about the history of the ordinances because we believe that they are critical to the discussion here tonight. The first ordinance I want to talk about is Ordinance 68-0-93. And I want to quote a specific line from that ordinance. It says that this property is to be used for a special use for an institution for the aged. This is an important provision, and I hope you make note of it. I will discuss it more later.
Is it your contention that the council can't make any changes to the zoning on this property?
I'll get through this. If you would give me the opportunity to get through, I think that my contentions will become very clear.
I'm trying to figure out how it's relevant to the standards.
Because we believe that the standard of that ordinance is still in place.
Thank you.
The original ordinance zoned the interior of the property as R4, multiple unit dwellings allowed. The exterior, 167 feet, all around the property was zoned R1, single-family homes. Clearly, when this organization came to Evanston, the plan was, on both behalf of the city council and the neighbors, and apparently in agreement with the Presbyterian Homes, that the interior of the property could be used for multiple unit facilities, but that the exterior of the property would be reflective of the community in which this property resided and was planned for as a R1 residential community. In the late 1950s, the applicant sought to build today's cottages, which were in violation of the R1 zoning. According to the Evanston Review records, the initial proposal was denied specifically because it did not meet the R1 zoning. Clearly, the city of Evanston and the neighbors felt that that R1 zoning for 167 feet all around the property was very important, or that would not have been voted down. I wasn't here at that time. I don't know how the negotiations continued, but at some point they did continue, and Ordinance 11061 addressed some of the changes that were made. Changes were made at that time, but even then, through this ordinance, the neighbors and the city wanted to preserve the green space on the outer edge of the property. And in Section 7 of that ordinance, it states that no garages shall be built at either the northeast or southeast corners of the property, but shall be at locations and constructed in a manner as approved by the Director of Planning of the City of Evanston. That location ended up being in the interior of their property. And if you just give me a moment, there was another point I wanted to make here. We believe also that the reason that it says garages specifically was because that was what was proposed. But we believe that the city council and the neighbors at that time never fathomed that somebody would come back and propose something like is proposed now. Or we believe it may have clearly stated that nothing should be built in those corners. Ordinance 11-061 further stated that the variation is granted upon an understanding with the applicant that in any future development of applicant's property, the intensity of use must observe limits so as to maintain the character of the neighborhood, and that this factor shall be taken into consideration in granting of any special use permits or further variation for future development of the property. And again, the neighborhood that they're talking about here is a high-value homes, low-density, single-family R1 zoning. Ordinance 68093, when they wanted to build the rec center, released them from condition of number 7 of the ordinance 11061 to permit construction of a fitness center. That was granted subject to, and the ordinance goes on to say, compliance with all other provisions of the zoning ordinance, other applicable laws, and the following conditions, except that the 2 proposed garages at the southwest corner of Grant and Lawndale and the 2 proposed garages at the northwest corner of Simpson or Gulf Road and Lawndale shall not be constructed. Once again, reinforcing the very long-term held policy of the city and the neighbors that construction shall not occur there.
You
All
are
other
you
co-
are aware of the fact that what's proposed here is a change from the prior ordinances.
I understand that, and our contention is that these ordinances create a covenant on behalf of the neighbors.
Please put your covenant argument in writing and present it to the Planning and Development Commission.
Could I please say something?
Yeah.
I would really appreciate it as a commissioner if we could. I'd really appreciate it as a commissioner if we could have them present without continued interruption, because I do think it breaks up the flow, and I also find it hard to track some of the arguments when she's being interrupted, if that's possible.
The rules of the commission provide that the chairman can make decisions about the testimony that's relevant. The chairman can be overridden by a majority of the Plan Commission. The decision that I expressed at the beginning of the meeting was that legal arguments about the existence of covenants, and I'm saying covenants as opposed to the 2 ordinances, should be made through legal briefs. It's on. And that we are, happy to hear the history as it may be relevant, but not legal arguments or claims that there are covenants as opposed to the 2 ordinances.
Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that as a citizen, I have a right to refute testimony that has been presented by the applicant.
You have
And
the
that
right
is-
to
that is
present
what
anything
we-
relevant to the standards.
And that is what we are doing. Now, I have not seen what you are saying was determined earlier, that these ordinances may not be relevant. We were not given a legal opinion on that, and until we see that, I would like to have the right to present our case. It may be that next month we come back with a different perspective and say you are absolutely right, but until we see that legal brief and have an opportunity to review it with our legal counsel, I don't believe it is reasonable to tell us 5 minutes before we start our comments that you have changed the rules of engagement here.
Let me ask the commission, do you wish to hear legal argument with respect to the existence of covenants as opposed to the 2 ordinances?
Yes.
Other commissioners?
And I don't consider this a legal argument. What I consider this is her opinion. She's expressing an opinion based on the ordinance as she's going through.
She's
So-
expressing legal conclusions.
She's,
I am not an
I don't
attorney,
see
and I
her
am
doing
not
that. I don't
expressing
see her
legal-
doing that. I see her presenting her opinion based on ordinances, and I think she should be allowed to go forward, and I would like to see whether or not the other commissioners agree.
Since you feel so strongly, if you want to hear it, she can proceed.
I just think we're spending more time arguing about this covenant word than just letting her go continue with her presentation. Scott?
I would agree. I would let her proceed,
Okay.
irrespective of whether it's relevant or not.
So then, as Mr. Peters wanted, why don't we all vote then on that? Should we vote on that, or do we just let that go?
I'm willing, since several of you want to hear it, it's fine with me.
Thank you.
May I proceed?
Please proceed.
Thank you very much. Okay. I just need a moment to figure out where I was here.
My point.
Oh, yes, ordinance 68-093. It did not change the other the covenants and the ordinance 11-061, including Section 8. Section 8 of 11-061 is very important, as you will see as we move forward. Even with this variation, though, there were no garages allowed to be built in the corners. The zoning, even after the cottages were built, remained R1, despite the fact that whatever agreement they reached that allowed them to build multi-unit buildings at that time, they did not change the zoning. The zoning, from what we are able to find out through the records, was only changed in 1993 through a citywide rezoning effort because the property already contained multi-unit buildings, because the cottages that are there today already existed. There was no notice given to the neighbors that anyone can recall or find evidence of, nor was there input provided from the neighbors to the city when this was done. We contend that Section 8 of 11-061 remained in force, and in fact, that the R1 zoning should appropriately remain in force, and that all of these factors create for the neighbors a covenant that was created by the city on behalf of the neighbors of the community. And it supports the longstanding effort, time and time and time again, almost every time they built something, to assure that green space remained and that the character of the community was not put in jeopardy by building R4 units at the edge of the property. Covenant supports the neighbor's expectation that the far east side of the property, and particularly the southeast and northeast corners, shall remain free and open at all times. It supports the neighbor's expectation for R1 zoning for 167 feet around the perimeter of the entire property. As a property owner, I have a right to count on that covenant. I have a right to count on that law being upheld, particularly when it has been upheld and has been an important part and a repeatedly upheld part of the zoning ordinances in our community. And if I can't count on that law, then we have some very serious problems in this city. But when I buy a house, particularly a high-value house with high tax base in a quiet neighborhood with a home for the aged at the end of the block, I should not have reason to be concerned that that is going to change overnight or for over a 20-year period, and that my property values are going to be put in jeopardy because what somebody has decided they want to build on their property is no longer in keeping with the character of our community. Covenants, by the way, as I'm sure you all know, supersede zoning ordinances. Section 8 of 11-061 remains today and was clearly articulated to prevent this very kind of development. Again, homeowners must have a reasonable assurance that covenants shall be maintained. And it's not at the whim of a specific group of neighbors or at the whim of a specific property owner or a plan commission or a city council. This is something that goes with the land. Now we'll get into a little more detail about how this proposal violates the various ordinances in our opinion. violation of Ordinance 68-093, a special use for an institution for the aged. I think we all know what we mean when we talk about the aged. We're talking about senior citizens. We're talking about people who are pretty much retired, who have slowed down in their activities. The proposed development is not for the aged, but for active couples in their early 60s. A phone call by one of our group members resulted in being told that this was for people who were in their early 60s, many of whom would still be working, some of whom might have children recently out of college that would live with them at times. This is in direct violation of Ordinance 68093. That ordinance, and there has never been an attempt to change that, clearly states that this property is to be used for a home for the aged. And our contention is that it would be unlikely that it would have ever received approval for location in that part of the city had it been for the type of active living development, a Del Webb type of community that is being proposed here today. With people going in and out, if you're talking about working families, you're going to dramatically increase the traffic as people leave for work every morning out of that complex. You're going to dramatically increase the traffic if they're having lots of visitors and lots of in and out activities. It was not intended for active seniors. Ordinance 11-061, that no garages shall be built on the northeast or southeast corners of the property. Today, they not only want to build garages, but they want to build them in a snout-style manner with massive townhouses attached to them. This is clearly a violation, in our opinion, of Ordinance 11-0-61. And to give you an idea of what we're talking about, I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to visit our neighborhood recently. This property, this picture, is the corner of Lawndale and Grant. This is the Presbyterian Homes property in Lake Forest. As you can see, it would dramatically change the character of our community. This style of housing is not in keeping with the character of Northwest Evanston.
Can you go back to the prior picture and tell us what it depicts?
Sure. It depicts a snout-style townhome residence where the garages protrude from the homes and face outward towards the community, taking up a majority of the front of the property so that the viewer, the neighborhood, would see mainly garage doors.
Is it your contention that the picture depicts what Presbyterian Homes proposes to build?
It is not a duplicate of what they have proposed to build. It is a sample of something that's similar. Since they have not actually built them, it's not possible to have pictures of what theirs will look like. Ordinance 11-0-61, any future or further development of applicant's property, the intensity of use must observe limits so as to maintain the character of the neighborhood. Again, we do not believe that the intensity and style maintain the character of our lovely Northwest Evanston community. Imagine 20 of these along Lawndale. That intensity of use does not fit with our community. It would dramatically change what our neighborhood looks and feels like today. This is the space that they're talking about building on. This type of housing does not reflect the character of our community. Nowhere in Evanston do you find townhouses in Northwest Evanston, let alone snout-style townhouses like these, where the garage is the predominant feature that everyone will look at. Even if there were only a few of them, it would be totally out of character for our community, and it wouldn't matter what materials you use to build them. This is their facility in Lake Forest. We don't have units that look like this in Northwest Evanston. And it may not be exactly what they are building, but this is what they told us repeatedly that we should go look at to get a sense for what kind of buildings they are talking about. By the way, this property was built in 1998, And they keep telling us that landscaping is going to hide these garages, that everything's going to be absolutely gorgeous. And the paintings that they drew were quite attractive. But let's look at the reality. How has landscaping hidden these garages? It can't in Lake Forest, and it won't in Evanston. By the way, talking about intensity of use, the Lake Forest homes, 100 of them, are built on 47 acres. They appear to have been built in 2 years, not 20 years. Again, the ordinance 11-061 says that they must reflect the character of the neighborhood, and yet they propose a row of 20 duplex townhouses that are not the character of the neighborhood. They propose a row of 22-car garages. I'm talking just about the Lawndale side because that's the side that's most heavily impacted, but it really applies to all 57 units that they're building. But on Lawndale, they propose a row of 22-car protruding garages, an additional parking space for 40 more cars. That means we could have 80 cars facing Lawndale. That's absolutely ridiculous in intensity. That's across from a neighborhood on Lawndale where the neighbors have 7 homes that touch Lawndale in the same 3-block span that they want to build 20 of them. Of those 7 homes, only 5 of them have garages facing Lawndale, far less than the 20 that they propose. And not a single one of those homes has a snout-style garage facing Lawndale. Again, 11-061 must observe limits to maintain the character of the community. This intensity does not match the intensity of our neighborhood. You have 7 houses versus 20, I think is the most clear comparison of their project versus our community. And we really demand that Ordinance 11-061 be upheld. This is part of a covenant that was created on behalf of the residents of our community, not to change on the whims of the housing market or changes in senior living styles or anything else. Now I want to address some of the issues in the applicant's proposal. I think their proposal needs a bit of a reality check. Their proposal states that the cottage replacement program provides a more modern and appropriate solution to meet the needs of today's independent seniors. And fundamental to meeting those needs is the ability of seniors to live on a single floor. And yet, their proposal is 2.5-story units. They call them 1.5-story cottages, and yet by virtually every standard we could find, they're 31.8 feet, or 31 feet 8 inches to 33 feet 4 inches, is in line with a 2.5-story building. These are not cottages. Cottages sound really nice, really sweet, really cute, really quaint. You could reasonably describe what is there today as cottages. You cannot reasonably describe a massive 2.5-story building with over 5,000 square foot footprint on the main floor as a cottage. It's a townhouse. To give you an idea of the size we're talking about, this is my home. I think I'm being generous when I say it's about 32 feet tall, and 2,300 square feet is right off the plat of survey. This is about a few inches less than what they are proposing, and about half the size of what each building will be on the main floor. Again, their proposed buildings, duplex combines, they combine approximately 32 to 30 feet tall, 32 to 35 feet tall, with over 5,000 square feet on the main floor and 1,600 square feet on the second floor of each structure. Their second floor, they've repeatedly talked about it being for storage, and gosh, maybe someone would build it out, or maybe someone would put a family room up there or something. But when you look at the plans that they submitted, and what is on here is the plan directly from their proposal, and you will see that this second floor unit, according to their plans, has storage, as they talked about. It also has a bedroom with a walk-in closet. Gosh, I wish I had a walk-in closet in my small house. It has also a family room, an office, and an area open to the first floor. This is not a home for the aged. This is not a 1.5-story cottage. This proposal is not in character with our community, where single-family homes are spread out on large plots of land. This, for example, is a view of a home directly across from the property in question here. It's a home that faces on Lawndale. As I said, these are not cottages. They are not for the aged. They are not the single-floor living that they so desperately need for their citizens and residents, and they are not, absolutely not, in keeping with the character of our community. We believe they are in violation of numerous City of Evanston ordinances and zoning restrictions, including 68093, which allows for an institution for the aged, not a Del Webb-style community for active living, and in violation of 6-63, the public benefits A, B, C, and E. The proposal also violates the ordinance with their proposed apartment building and height limitations and density. It does not conform to heights for zoning, and it does not comply with the ordinance for Planned Development 6369 or 6363 public benefits. One more thought on that apartment building, by the way. That apartment building is going to be in a location where right now the garages for those cottages are located. And we fail to understand why, if you take those garages and move them to the outer perimeter of the property and make the property very dense on the outer perimeter, you should get to use that space to build a 4-story building instead of using that space to lessen the density of your proposal. As the co-founder of To Rescue Evanston Elms, I'd be remiss if I didn't address the tree issue. Their plan, and again, this is a copy directly from their proposal, calls for the removal of 195 trees. They say 60 of them are diseased, and as a person who has worked diligently the last 5 years to save trees here in Evanston, I would ask what the heck they're doing not taking care of their trees, that they have 60 diseased trees on their property, but that's not at issue here, how they care for their trees. But what is at issue is what effect that would have on our community. The ordinances clearly state that trees are to be preserved, and unfortunately we did not have time to compare their proposal to the most recently adopted tree ordinance, which was adopted by the City Council, I believe, just 2 months ago. But we will certainly do that. But the loss of 195 trees, plus all the other mature plantings and shrubbery around the area, are of extreme concern to our community. Right now, if you came and walked around their property or walked down Normandy Place, you would see, you might run into a Cooper hawk, a green heron, lots of cardinals and blue jays and other animals that make their homes in their property and in around their property. We have some amazing wildlife in our community. Those will be put at jeopardy with the loss of 195 trees. Not to mention the ongoing 20 years of construction, which will interrupt the coyotes and the fox and the raccoons and possums, which sometimes I'm not sure that would be a bad thing, but as environmentalists that we all have become, I think it needs to be an issue of concern. We believe this proposal violates Sections 63510 and 6363, public benefits. Again, a pattern of development which preserves natural vegetation. As I said, they plan to remove 195 trees, and that is of extreme concern and a violation of the ordinances. I'd like you to take a walk with me to understand the space that we're talking about here today. This is at the corner of Grant and Lawndale looking west. And as I said at the beginning of my discussion, the city has consistently worked to preserve green space along the entire perimeter of this property. And you will see it all along the north side, the northeast side, the east side, and the southeast side of the property. This is a wide space here at Grant and Lawndale. As you move down the street 1 block south of Grant to Normandy Place and look back to the corner where we were just at, this is the view you get. A mature elm tree, some maple trees, lots of green space. There had actually been one of the most gorgeous, mature, elegant elm trees in the city of Evanston in that open space until a couple of years ago. If you look south from Normandy, this is the view you get. That row of elm trees that was there continues looking south on Normandy. And again, a wide expanse of green space that is shared between the community and their own residents. And it's a wonderful place for us to come together with them, which we often do out on walks. We're walking our dogs and they stop and talk with us, etc. If you look south, the street south of Normandy is Payne. And this is at the corner of Lawndale and Payne, looking south. Again, more green space, open green space, mature trees, mature shrubbery. This is looking west on Gulf. Gulf Road is a busy street. It's actually a state highway. And yet, even on Gulf Road, the green space is preserved. And not just a little strip, but a wide expanse of green space with beautiful, mature trees. Again, the preservation and enhancement of desirable site characteristics and open space will be lost under their proposal in violation of Ordinance 6363, Public Benefits A. The loss of community-facing green space is a direct violation of this ordinance. And it is also a violation of the covenant that we believe exists and has existed for nearly 100 years between the residents of this community and the Presbyterian homes. And that covenant still, we believe, stands today. 6363 Public Benefits E, provision of a variety of housing types in accordance with the city's housing goals. While there are variations in their proposal, they are all essentially the same building. They're very similar style, and they are very similar, and they are all the snout house style. And again, let me define for you how we define snout house and how many other communities have defined snout houses. It's where the garage protrudes far beyond the front of the house, and where it takes up a large portion of the front space. Some communities have defined that as over 25%, others as over 50%. But that type of building is so offensive to community standards that many communities, including some in our area here, have banned them. Glencoe, Illinois, Riverside, Illinois are two of the communities that I know that have banned them. Other communities across the country that we were able to find in this short period of time include Brookline, Massachusetts, Gainesville, Florida, and Portland, Oregon, have banned this specific type of housing because it is considered such an affront to the community. The density with a duplex that is more than about 5,000 square feet is just amazing to us. They can play games with the numbers and say we're reducing the density because there's only 54 units instead of 57. Each unit is twice the size of what the current units exist. It is a huge density, and the center, with yet another 4-story building, really takes the commercial level of that property to a level that is totally inappropriate for R1 zoned neighborhood. In Lake Forest, they built 100 homes on 47 acres in a development that is off by itself, bordered by the Edens Expressway on one side, the hospital on another, Waukegan Road on another, and a business on another. This proposal wants to put 54 homes plus a 4-story apartment building on 14 acres in a community that is in an area that is bordered by single-family homes, in a situation where they are really part of the community, not off on their own. This density is not appropriate for our neighborhood. 54 townhome units with active seniors with 2 garage spaces per unit and 2 additional spaces in the parking slabs outside those garages, plus 90 apartment building parking spaces, makes total car space of 306 cars. I'm not going to want to be trying to get to work in the morning driving down Grant Street, which is already overcrowded with parking, overflow parking from their employees, when suddenly you've got hundreds of residents trying to exit at the same time, because now instead of a home for the aged, we have active seniors, many of whom are still working. This is what parking looks like today. Ever since they've built the last building there, I think it's Arbor 3, it has dramatically increased parking issues in our neighborhood. And so when you're driving down Grant, which occasionally has buses driving down it even, this is what you see. People have to pull over. There's already inadequate parking that overflows into our neighborhood. And I don't know of any business that today is allowed to build without making accommodations for employee parking on their facility. Landscaping. They showed us beautiful pictures, paintings of landscaping. But what we need to look at is what the reality has been. Again, this is their property in Lake Forest. This is 13 years after it was built, and yet the landscaping isn't as mature as what they told us was 2-year maturity of landscaping in their beautiful paintings. So we have no reason to believe that those paintings accurately reflect the landscaping that we could expect, and there is nothing in their proposal that provides for assurances, regulations that this will be done on a certain date, trees of this size will be put in, shrubbery of this size and style and kind will be put in, etc. There's also no detail provided about the type of about what will be built and when it will be built. They give us some rough idea that we'll build 6 cottages this 2-year period and 6 the next 2-year period, and sometime over 20 years we'll get this all done. But we don't have any assurance, and in fact they tell us that they don't know when they're going to build where, because it depends on what the market is. They also tell us that buyers will have the opportunity to choose the style that they want. Again, the minimal diversity of style that exists in their plan is not guaranteed to exist at all if buyers are allowed to choose what is being built. We've seen no samples of the materials to be used, but we do understand that they will not be the same types of materials that are used in our neighborhood with brick and real stone and real timber. Despite the reduction in units according to their claim, and I will just point out, the number of units that will be in the apartment building, there's nothing to keep them from coming back when they get around to building that apartment building in 10 years or whatever the schedule is, 15 years, and saying, well, gee, the market's changed. Instead of 3-bedroom units, now we want twice as many or 3 times as many 1-bedroom units. So you're building a huge building whose capacity can change over time. But we believe the actual numbers will increase. We took a look at the voter registration rolls, and from what we can tell, there are a fair number of units currently on that property of the 57 units that are occupied by individual residents, not couples. We think it's reasonable to expect that at least 2 people would live in these massive new homes, not individuals, thus increasing the density of the property. And of course, the addition of individuals in the apartment building also increases the density, and we have no guarantees that the density proposed today will not change over time. somehow I just lost my space. Let me get back to where I was. Okay, sirens. Thank you. There we go. We can also expect that the number of sirens we hear, because the actual number of residents will increase, that the noise in the neighborhood will also increase. If you come spend the night at my house, or even more so Nina's house, you will hear sirens 24 hours a day. The Presbyterian Homes is the second largest user in the city of Evanston of ambulance and fire services. And everyone in our neighborhood hears it all the time. To increase the density puts an additional burden on the neighborhood. Again, there's tremendous lack of specificity in their proposal. This type of proposal would not be permitted otherwise, with the extreme timing, no way to assure diversity of style, no assurance of a landscaping schedule, and I don't know how you landscape when you've got construction going on over a 20-year period, no assurance of what these will look like, or even actually who will live there. We believe the applicant violates numerous city ordinances and zoning laws, so we ask you to vote no, but thank you.
My name is Gary Dupuis. I reside at 3004 Normandy Place. I have been sworn in. And I've lived on Normandy for 15 years. I'd like to talk a little bit about the economic impact of the project as it relates to standards. My profession is a CFO of a general contractor, but what I'm going to express today is mostly based on the opinion of our group. (6363) Public Benefits G talks about enhancing the local economy and the strengthening of the tax base as a standard for planned developments. We firmly believe that the change in character of the community that this proposal presents, the loss of community-facing green space, the undesirable wall of homes, and extreme construction schedule clearly violates this ordinance in our opinion. It jeopardizes our local property values. 63510, standards C and D, talks about the development must not cause a negative cumulative effect. Again, we firmly believe that this project does cause a negative cumulative effect. The standard also indicates that it should not interfere or diminish with the value of property in the neighborhood, and again, we believe that is a violation also. Applicants claim is that this new project will pay property taxes. In fact, they pointed out in their presentation that they will be paying $587,000 per year in property taxes for Westminster Place, and that they have a minimal impact on city services, and that the 20-year cumulative fiscal effect will be nearly $3 million. But if we drill down to the numbers in this presentation, their $587,000 of property taxes is representative of the entire 16-block area that their development occupies. If you compare the property taxes paid by the homeowners on our block, it totals $300,000 for one block. So multiply that by the 16-block space of the Presbyterian Homes, and you're close to $5 million. So that means that the amount of property taxes paid is not significant compared to the property that they occupy. And so an argument could be made that we, the neighbors, have been subsidizing the applicant's residence in Evanston. The applicant also talks about the minimal impact it has on city services. As Virginia indicated, the Presbyterian Homes is the second largest user of fire and ambulance services in the city of Evanston, second only to Northwestern University. We would propose that that places a significant burden on the city services. So they indicate $3 million property taxes over 20 years. That's $149,000 per year. Divide that by the 90 units they want to build, $1,659 per unit. When compared to the $20,000 of property taxes that each of the homes on Normandy Place averages, the portion of our $20,000 is comparatively much greater. The bottom line is that the increased tax revenue from the applicant cannot benefit the city if it is offset by the diminishment of property tax values of all the surrounding neighborhood homes. It's a zero-sum game. I'd like to talk a little bit about 68110 now, which states that each planned development and all landscaping shall be compatible with and implement the adopted comprehensive general plan, particularly in terms of the impact on schools, public services, and facilities, and the conservation of the taxable value of land and buildings throughout the city. We propose that this plan does not conserve the taxable value of the land and buildings in the surrounding neighborhood that are on the tax rolls. One last point that I would like to make, we neighbors are not disputing this commission's right to amend the laws, the standards of the ordinances, nor are we disputing the right of the city council to amend ordinances or covenants or standards. But you know, the United States of America also has a mechanism by which the laws are changed in the Constitution. But I would suggest that it's used very sparingly, and it's never done so without careful consideration of the intent of our forefathers. And we ask that you also do the same thing and vote no for this plan.
So, in summary, again, I'm Nina Paleologos, and I was sworn in and testified earlier. We feel the applicant has been disingenuous throughout this process in describing 1.5-story cottages when they are really 2+story townhomes by the zoning analysis that was done by the city. The neighborhood assessment did not look at homes on the east side of the property, which are the most highly valued and would be the most heavily impacted by this planned development. They've talked about decreased density by playing with the numbers, as Virginia said, but it's actually really dramatically increased density, particularly in the footprint, the height, the square footage of the proposed townhouses, and the addition of a 4-story apartment building. They say that they've had conversations with the neighborhood, but frankly, there haven't been many. They were long ago until this last couple of months. And it's essentially just been the Presbyterian Homes Corporation giving their same presentation over and over and over again. We feel that their 20-year construction plan is unprecedented and would cause a huge, huge, huge impact on our community. We also feel, and I think was said here last month by even one of the Plan Commission members, that the applicant's past behavior always is an indication of future behavior, and we feel that the applicant's past behavior is a concern. They suggested that we go to Lake Forest so we could see what they can do and what they were going to do. This is a picture of what they did at Lake Forest. That type of development is not appropriate in our community. We also feel, having lived here for a number of years, that promises that the applicant has made in previous requests for variances and exceptions to the rule over many years have not been kept. Specifically in 1993 with the development of the recreation center. That was about to get turned down. We all were opposed to that building. Why? Because it was outside of the zoning. It was higher, it was bigger. But we worked with the Presbyterian homes, and we talked to them, and we did this in good faith. And they promised at that time, which is reinforced in the 93 ordinance, that they would not build further along those corners, wrapping around from Lawndale onto Grant and down to the south corner by Gulf. They promised. They also promised it would look different than it did. They promised to do landscaping that never happened. Those promises that they've made in the past have not been kept. So it should not be a surprise to this Plan Commission that we don't feel very trusting right now of anything other than is written down in their plan. And we've shown you how a number of the things written in their plan that they've presented to you are not in fact true. Look at what they've actually done. Now, this isn't Lake Forest, and this isn't someplace else. This is the west side of the property along Prospect Avenue. This is actually what they've done. This does not look anything like those beautiful paintings that they showed us here last month. It does not. Here's Prospect. Here's a very thin strip of land. Here's a service road, and here's a bunch of garages. What they're proposing to do along Lawndale will look even worse than this. The height will be higher, it will be denser, it will essentially be a wall of townhomes across that 3-block space. Should we really be trading this green space for what they have built elsewhere, like in Lake Forest or like along Pioneer? Look at this, and then look at what they've built. That will be the difference. We request that the applicant for the City of Evanston provide a copy of all previous plans submitted to the City of Evanston regarding the building of garages or other buildings on the southeast and northeast corners of the subject property. We request that the City of Evanston attorney review the proposal and provide an opinion on its validity. We request that you all vote no. The city's residents have the right to rely on the ordinance that were passed, and we feel that the Presbyterian Homes Corporation should not break their word with the neighborhood. We want to show you what we believe the new Lawndale will look like. Now, I want to stress that these drawings are the Presbyterian Homes drawings. We took these out of the planned development proposal that they turned in to you. We did blow them up, but we have tried very hard to blow them up to scale. The only alteration that we made of these is that we cross-hatched the roofs so that you could actually see that those were roofs and not just measurement lines. That's what Lawndale would look like if they were to go ahead with this. And that's not even considering the 4-story apartment building that would loom over it. Thank you for your time. Please vote no.
The rules of the commission provide that the applicant may cross-examine at the end of a presentation of this type.
Is this live, Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman, in the spirit of Presbyterian Homes, as opposed to cross-examining the witnesses, we would prefer to present some rebuttal testimony.
In that case, we will take
5
questions
minutes.
from the commission and then go into rebuttal.
Thank you.
Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I would prefer actually to hear the rebuttal offered by the proponents here, because during that, they may very well answer some of the questions that I have. That would be my preference.
It's not consistent with our rules, but if that's how the commission would like to proceed, we can do that.
I would like so. I would save time.
You agree? Then let's proceed with the rebuttal. Actually, before the rebuttal, maybe we should hear from other objectors. There are some other people in opposition who have not testified, and we could hear them first and then give them. Is Ross Altman here? You signed up to testify.
Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, and I am sworn in, I'm Ross Altman, and with my family, I reside at 3042 Normandy Place, the southeast corner of Lawndale, Normandy. I've been a resident there for approximately 6 years. First, I also want to thank Mr. Zweig and Mr. Talty, who both have taken my phone calls over the last couple of weeks and discussed some of my concerns, and I appreciate their time. I also submitted written comments along with my wife to the commission this morning, and I hope you take the time to review those comments. And in the interest of time, I just want to highlight a couple of my comments this evening. Because I remain concerned with the proposal and the, excuse me, the imbalance in the proposal by asking the neighbors to accept a significant change in the character of the area and a 20-year plan of execution. With respect to the design, you've heard a lot of testimony regarding the design, and I don't want to be repetitive. I just want to mention a couple of things that I look at a little bit differently. As the neighbors have pointed out, the proposed cottages are very large buildings. A typical home on Normandy Place, where I live, is approximately 3,200 square feet. That's on multiple floors. The duplex cottages have a footprint of around 4,000 square feet. So in other words, they're about twice as large as anything on Normandy, so the scale is disproportionate. I also look at the intensity of use as described by the applicant a little bit differently. The applicant has testified that there'll be a 5% increase in building coverage, and I have no doubt that that in fact is the case. But based on the floor plans for the existing cottages that are on the website of the applicant and the presentations that have been made over the last couple of months, the cottage footprints increase by about 40%. Some are less, some are more. But that's a very dramatic increase. And while that may be offset elsewhere on the site, it doesn't change the fact that what the neighbors are going to see, what I'm going to see directly across, directly to the east of Presbyterian Homes, and what other neighbors will see, is a very, very large increase in cottage size, cottage footprint, cottage scale that is pushed closer to the perimeter of the property. I'm also gravely concerned with a 20-year construction period. We don't want to acknowledge this sometimes, but for many of us, that's a lifetime. It's a lifetime. And I don't think it's reasonable to expect anyone to live adjacent to a construction site for 20 years, even if construction isn't persistent and ongoing throughout the entire 20-year period. It will diminish the quality of life of the neighbors on a day-to-day basis. Construction presents a very real health and safety consideration. And indeed, there's no doubt that it's going to place downward pressure on home values during the course of construction. Now, I know that the applicant has entered into testimony a study that, in fact, the project will not diminish or hurt property values. But I have my doubts as to the conclusions. And it must presume that ultimately the project is complete and it's fully occupied, and that's at least 20 years away, or potentially 20 years away. During construction, I think there's going to be very, very real pressure on the neighborhood. I could ride it out, I suppose, but I may not want to, and other neighbors may not have that choice. Also, I'd mentioned that in the March meeting, the gentleman who was presenting the study on economic impact indicated that one of the most problematic aspects that affects real estate values is uncertainty, and that the proposal of the Presbyterian Homes creates certainty. I beg to differ. I would submit that a 20-year plan of construction that really doesn't have a lot of definition to it creates 20 years of uncertainty, and in fact, during the period of construction, is going to place a tremendous amount of downward pressure on property prices. The applicant has indicated that they really have no choice but to embark on a lengthy construction plan, in part because of relocation concerns of the current residents. I understand that. I'm not necessarily convinced that the problem is as acute as the applicant would have us believe. My understanding is that the turnover in the cottages is reasonably frequent, and in fact, there was testimony in March from the applicant that they have taken steps already to accommodate movement of their residents, particularly along the east side of the property. I think, frankly, the bigger concern is what was also mentioned in March, and that's, frankly, market absorption. I understand that concern. But in my mind, that's a risk of doing business. That is the risk of the Presbyterian homes, and it's not fair to transfer the burden of that business risk by imposing an open-ended construction plan on the neighborhood. Finally, there's been a lot of talk of evolution. That's a key phrase that a lot of folks have used in the last couple of hearings. In my opinion, I don't believe the proposal with respect to the cottages has evolved much over time. I met with some representatives of the Presbyterian homes. It was probably a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. And at that time, indeed, there was a duplex cottage in each corner along Lawndale. Since then, one of those cottages has been removed, and one of them has been relocated to the interior of the property. So there's been a net reduction in duplex units from 28 to 27. Some green space has been added back to the plan right where Normandy meets Lawndale, and as a resident on that corner, indeed, I'm thankful for that. But otherwise, the size, the intensity of use, the layout on the site of the cottages has been largely static. My family and I think that we're good neighbors. We want to be good neighbors. We want Presbyterian homes to succeed because we understand that that can inure to our benefit as well. But that success cannot be at the expense of the neighborhood. Improving the Presbyterian home site provides an opportunity for a win-win situation. I don't think that's rhetoric. I don't think it's mythical. I think that it's possible. But in my judgment, that requires more evolution, a term that has been used by the Presbyterian homes, at least more evolution with respect to the cottages toward a better balance, a balance where the neighbors are not taking on the burden of the applicant's business and market risk. I think more that can be done with respect to this proposal. I thank you for your time and for your consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson? We have Bruce Wilson asked to testify.
Bruce Wilson. I live at 2315 Ridgeway. I was sworn in. I simply want to voice my opposition to the Presbyterian home proposal, support the excellent presentation that the neighbors presented, and I hope you guys really consider it. Thank you.
Mr. John Frank signed up.
Hello, I'm John Frank. I took the oath, and I testified at the last hearing as well. I live at 2304 Lawndale. I'm north of the home, right across Grant, 2 houses from the corner. And I want to, first of all, echo everything that was presented. I agree with that presentation wholeheartedly. I've also spent several nights walking the streets on the north side, on Lawndale, excuse me, on Hastings and Ridgeway to find out what my neighbors think. On that side of the home, we held a meeting at my house a few weeks ago to talk, and all I really needed to do was show people the Presbyterian Homes plan for them to react and say it was too dense, too intense, too massive, and too long. Now, I know laws can be changed, government can make decisions, but community standards should figure into that. And the community is telling you this plan is not the right plan for that site. There's actually a supplement in the Chicago Tribune today about senior living that's saying the same thing. It's talking about developments all over Chicago where they're building 1-story, 2-bedroom, 1-car garage homes for senior citizens. This project is not the right project in the right site at the right time for the right neighborhood. One other note, that's pretty much the point I wanted to make. One other note, I came in a suit tonight. I didn't wear this last time, but it dawned on me that at the last meeting, the only people in suits seemed to be saying things the Presbyterian home wanted to hear. So I thought maybe for them to hear me, I should wear a suit, because they have not been listening to their neighbors. Much was made by their proponents at the last meeting of what a caring institution it is. I've never contested that, but I would say, well, now is time to care about what the neighbors are telling them. I went to the meeting Nina referred to that they called after the last Plan Commission meeting. I left that meeting hearing you say we should all talk, And my interpretation of that was we should get together and try to work on a compromise. We went to that meeting, and they showed the same plans that they had presented to you. There was no effort to compromise. I spoke to their architect. I said, where's the compromise here? He said, well, we're just going to wait and hear what you have to say to the Plan Commission. That, to me, is not working with the community. That's not being a caring institution. And I think that should be taken into consideration here as well. Thank you.
Karen O'Brien.
Oh, Karen O'Brien. Laura Friedland. Mary Alice Off. Maybe I pronounced it wrong. Larry Raphael.
Hi, my name is Larry Raffel. I live at 3509 Central Street, and I have been sworn in. And I wanted to come before you and voice my support of the neighbors and my opposition to this project as it stands right now. To give you a little bit of my background, as you'd asked before, I'm a landscape architect and planner. I've been doing this for 25 years, primarily representing developers, and then I also sat on the Plan Commission where you guys sit. And so I have a little bit of understanding in the amount of time and energy that you guys put into these decisions. And I can tell you as a Plan Commissioner, I drive down streets now, and I look at projects, and I feel very proud. I look at other projects, and I feel very frustrated that what I was shown as a Plan Commissioner never came to fruition. And it's something you have to think about very carefully, what you're being shown and what is actually happening. A lot of really excellent points have been made by the neighbors, and I don't want to rehash those because you've heard them all before. But one thing I do want to talk about is open space. I currently serve, because I can't get away from serving on some board, I currently serve on the Playground and Recreation Board. And I'm here strictly as a neighbor, but the loss of open space on this plan is disturbing. That open space, particularly at the corner of Lawndale and Grant, is just valuable, valuable open space. And in a city like Evanston, we cannot afford to lose open space, particularly when it can be used by the neighborhood. What this plan is doing is basically it's taking their open space and bringing it inside their development and putting the street on the perimeter of their development, which really, as a designer, makes no sense to have an interior street adjacent to a public street. Not only does it take away open space, it makes it more confusing for the public street and the interior street to be together, and then like they showed in their presentation, it has the garages all facing the neighborhood, and by doing that, you certainly lose the character of that neighborhood. These homes don't match, and you're putting them right out in front, right where they're right into the neighborhood. So you're taking the open space away, which does belong. You're putting these townhomes, basically, out on the street where they don't belong. And it's disturbing, particularly as a landscape architect, to see open space like that disappear. Another thing that kind of is a little bit disturbing about the development, in addition to the roadway, is one of the items that was mentioned in the presentation is that the Presbyterian home is the #2 user of the emergency services. When you bring in more residents and you've got that one access on Grant Street, you've got a lot of traffic on Grant Street. And Grant Street is a pretty heavily used east-west street for people who are going north to south, going east to west. And you've got a lot of children playing there. There's a playground right nearby. There's open space. A lot of kids play in their front yards. And to me, that's a real safety hazard right there by having one access point onto Grant Street. And again, the developer will tell you, we did traffic studies. It's not a hazard. It won't increase traffic. Believe me, I've sat there. I've listened to this. I know it does. So what I want to say is, I don't live adjacent to the property. I live in Northwest Evanston, and as a resident of Evanston, no matter where you live, you have to be concerned about what's happening in this town. And I felt it was incumbent upon me, simply as a resident of Evanston, to stand up and say, I think you need to look at this development a little bit more carefully and look what it's doing to that neighborhood and the city of Evanston as a whole. And again, I do appreciate all your time and effort that you place into this position. So thank you.
I think it's Jean Wadsworth?
Hi, I'm Jean Wadsworth. I live at 3042 Payne Street, and most of the things that I was going to say tonight have been covered by a great presentation of my neighbors, and I appreciate that. I would just like to say that I am opposed to this project based on two principles. The density of the project that would change the whole neighborhood, the whole feel of the neighborhood, taking away all that green space that we all enjoy and use. And also, the trees are another one of my problems with the project. When I look out at the Presbyterian home now, today, yesterday, beautiful weather, the flowering trees, the mature trees that are around the cottages and the surrounding areas are beautiful, and all that is going to go. That just disturbs me a great deal. So the parking is another issue that and the traffic issue will be a great concern. So anyway, for the neighborhood and to continue with the presence of the neighborhood, I ask that you vote against this. Thank you.
Someone else has signed up with the same last name. I can't make out the first name. Same address.
They call me the dark man.
Ah.
You knew who that was.
Can you believe I married that woman that she married me? Unbelievable. That one. I'm going to go to the core and wash my face, everybody. I feel like Jesse James.
We need you near a microphone,
Don't worry about it. My voice carries. My kids are still.
but it won't be on the record,
Yeah.
which is why we need you near a microphone.
Who wants to go use that one? There's a microphone there, right?
Yeah, you got it, kid. So in 1956, I come here from DePaul University in Greencastle, Indiana, thinking I was a hotshot quarterback. I transferred Big Ten football. And I go out for practice. I'm a walk-on. And the assistant coach is a fellow by the name of...
Mr. Wadsworth, you know, you really are going to have to speak into
And
the
the assistant
microphone
coach is a
because
fellow
this
by
is
the name of
on
Lou
the
Saban.
record.
You know, I was going to tell you that it's so great to see you, I'll tell you. So, you still got the hands, kid. That's beautiful.
Let the record show that
Stuart has hands.
Stuart caught the football which was thrown.
So I arrive here, and I think, what an idyllic community. I think I'm going to make this team baby at all costs. So I start throwing these passes in practice. Perfect. Feathering into the hands of the receivers. I'm in. George Steinbrenner, who at that time, as I said, was the assistant coach, walks over to me on the third day, and I could see that look in his eyes. He said, "Kid, you're not that good." I said, "George, what do I do?" He said, "Sell insurance, buddy. You got a real opportunity there." So 56 years later, I found a fine home. I'm still in my same profession. I reside at 3042 Payne Street. I did take the oath, and I do know Stuart. I want to talk to you about the Plan Commission. Your purpose, as I understand it, is to formulate basic policies for a comprehensive plan, initiate studies concerning present and future development and redevelopment of the city, so on and so forth. You all know this. I commend you on what you do. Gratis, right, Mr. Galloway? And the criteria for being on the Plan Commission, you must be an Evanston resident, so I could get on. But I understand you have credentials. You are a man of some repute, Stuart, and Mr. Galloway is an urban planner and architect. That's all I know. The rest of you dudes, I'm going to get to know. I thank Nina, I thank Karen, I thank Laura, I thank Virginia, and I thank Gary for doing the job. Two things concern me. I live there, I love it. Raised all my kids there. Jeannie stuck with me so far. I have her on an embezzlement charge, so she can't go too far. Two things, safety. We got older drivers like me hustling around that area. We're going to have some accidents, and there's going to be some real problems. Would you, the Plan Commission, would you buy a home in our neighborhood right now? Would you buy my house at 3042 Payne Street? I don't see a response. Well, I don't know if you can afford it. Let's assume I lower it 50%, and you're going to live through 20 years. It's 2031. I'm 96 years old, struggling. I turn to Jean. I say, "Are the jackhammers still out there?" She says, "No, you can't hear them. They're gone. You know, it's over." And I say, "Thank God. I can rest in peace." Stu and Sarah live across the street from me at that point in time. They're living through it, but they, I think, might have the same reaction. Sarah turned to you and saying, "Hey, buddy, we can't do this." So think about that. Would you live there? Some years ago, I talked to Peter Mulvey, president, and I got to tell you, Nancy Tolan is a hell of a gal. I admire her to the nth degree, and I see that scowl on her face. It's okay, Nancy. Things are going to be okay. And I was very passive about this project till suddenly I realized that I am in trouble, both from a safety and a traffic vantage point. I just want to emphasize those. Peter Mulvey and I were talking. He was president of the Presbyterian Home at that time. God rest his soul. Our fear is, Peter, that you will build along Lawndale. Dartman, we have no plans to do that. Well, Peter, all that has changed. I'm looking up at you, buddy. We're fighting for the quality of life that will depreciate substantially if this project is improved by the Planning Commission. We are fighting for a quality of life. You agree with me on that? Ladies, predominantly ladies get up here, you know. We are fighting for a quality of life that will depreciate substantially if this project is approved by the Planning Commission. So it's something we got to look at. Today I went to a website called NIMBY. Are any of you familiar with that? Not in my backyard. That's the deal. And it's the term, or the derivative NIMBYism, is used pejoratively to describe opposition by residents to a proposal for a new development close to them. I am a NIMBY. Now there's another term that goes along with that. It's a banana. Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. I am a NIMBY, I'm not a banana. So far I've accomplished that. So here we are. It's 2020. Shortly after 4 p.m., the driver of the silver SUV apparently lost control and jumped the curb at the intersection of Grant and the Presbyterian Home, stopping just short of the iron fence. The vehicle came to a stop between the base of a utility pole and a large tree. The impact tore the front left wheel completely off. Witnesses are saying as many as 4 people waiting on the sidewalk were struck. I saw 2 women, one with her legs bandaged and wooden splints, being loaded into waiting ambulances. The driver, aged 80, was pulling out of the Presbyterian Home and lost control. That could happen. I'm telling you, you got to consider traffic, you got to look at safety, unhesitatingly. Okay, John Frank, what a job you did. That article, and I know I bugged you, August 27, 2011, in the round table was exceptional. I thank you for your time. I think I have about 12 other notes, but I'm rambling now. But safety and increased traffic inextricably interwoven could cause us some real problems. And once again, reiteratively, Stu, that's a word I learned from you, we're fighting for a quality of life that will depreciate substantially if this project is approved by the Planning Commission. Thank you for your time.
Eddie Brady.
Is that football a bribe?
No, I'll take it back before I leave.
Go long, John.
Too good a pass, Stuart. I'm not used to that.
Nice, Stu. Nice, Stu.
Ms. Brady, go ahead.
Okay, I'm Betty Brady at 3030 Grant. I'm just 3 doors from Presbyterian Homes. And I want to speak to an issue of trust. Some of us have difficulty believing that Presbyterian Homes will do what they promise to do and deliver on their promises. And I'm thinking back to when the Kimball Fitness Center was built. I went to those meetings, maybe that was, I don't know, a dozen years ago or so. I recall very little resistance because we were told it was going to be for the community. It was going to be a neighborhood facility. It sounded great. So when construction was complete, I eagerly called the Presbyterian Homes to ask what days and times the neighbors could use the facility, and I got a very curt response: the facilities are for residents only. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in opposition that's gotten to the end of my list, but it could be incomplete? Please come forward, tell us your name and address, and maybe I have another list somewhere.
It was on the top of the new.
Here's one. Ms. Epler.
My name is Sue Epler. I was sworn in earlier. My address is 3039 Normandy. I am also in opposition to this proposal. I support what my neighbors have put together. I would be one of those families with the young children who will be out of college when this proposed development is finished, if you allow a 20-year timeline on. I'm one of the newer residents on Normandy. One of my homes was one of the ones shown. I purchased it for $1.2 million just a few years ago. My husband and I chose it so we could raise our children there, as if it is our forever house, expecting to live there until we retired and moved on. The thought of living next to a construction zone and having those types of houses, townhouses, cottages, next to, one house away from where I live. If I had known that, I would not have purchased my house. I would have spent my money elsewhere in Evanston. I chose my house because it's a quiet street. My children can play there. My children play on the green space. My children walk along the edge of the green space to go to Cartwright Park, which is on the other side. Right now, the road that is there is a service road. Because there are very few cars along there, I feel safe allowing my children to play there. If you put 20 garages there with 2 cars each, that's at least 40 cars going in and out of there. That becomes a road, not a service road. That's a very different situation for children who play in the neighborhood. It changes the character of the neighborhood. And it's not, although I love my neighbors, if I had known all of that, I would not have purchased my house where I did. Thank you.
We have one person who wanted to speak in favor and signed up. Mr. Frank, might be Beckler.
Hi, I'm Frank Becker. I'm a resident of 2105 Lawndale, so I actually face the project and probably can be affected by this more than anybody else in the room. I signed up on this side more because I want to provide a little bit of a balanced view, which are some of the people in the area. Not everyone in the neighborhood is violently opposed to this. We all have significant concerns. These meetings have been going on for several years, and the most recent meeting was only a few months ago. And significant changes were made to the plan to accommodate the residents, not everything that we wanted. Probably the biggest issue that many of us have is the number of garage doors facing the street. We need to have some kind of an assurance or something that this is not going to look like an alley. It is a large number of doors facing. And we had asked for the doors to maybe be rotated. We were told that was not architecturally possible, that there would be considerable amounts of landscaping. The landscaping issue, I think, in this community has gone back and forth. And I think actually the Presbyterian Homes has been trying to accommodate us. At the first meeting, people actually requested less landscaping because they wanted more green space. So the landscaping was taken out. By the second meeting, people wanted it back in. There is considerable disagreement even within the neighborhood of how much should be landscaped. I think the majority of us who live on that street want lots of landscaping to block garage doors. Okay. There have been lots of contested issues about sidewalk, no sidewalk. My feeling is they've been very reasonable with that, and my understanding is they'll pretty much do whatever the residents want and what the city of Evanston mandates in the way of should we have a sidewalk. Many of us don't object to the size of the homes or the roof lines. I have much more of a problem looking out at the apartment buildings than the roof lines of these homes, and actually a little higher roof line makes me a little happier because I see less of the apartment buildings. So I have found them to be good neighbors, and I am speaking in support of them because I think that actually in these discussions, although there are many things that we would have wanted as part of this plan, we have not been able to get everything that we've wanted, but I think that they have been working with us in good faith. We've had meetings, we've had discussions, and I just wanted to, put the perspective of the few people on the block, they actually sort of, for the most part, I think, are supportive of this. We would still like to see some modifications, some assurances that the quality of the homes is going to be what has been presented, that the finishes are going to be what's expected, that they're not all going to be of the same materials, that we're going to have variety, and that the landscaping that they promised will in fact go in. But overall, I think that there are many people that are in the neighborhood that I think quietly overall support the project. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sir, could you state your name and address, and have you been sworn?
My name's Larry Schnurr. I live at 2301 Lawndale. I live catty corner from the northeast corner, and I believe I'm one of the most affected residents. We've lived in.
Did you get sworn as a witness?
I did get sworn.
Would you spell the name since I don't have it in writing?
My name is Schnurr, S-C-H-N-U-R, Larry.
Go ahead.
We've lived in Evanston since '92, 3 years on Michigan Avenue as a renter, 13 years at 601 Linden Place as an owner of a condo, and we moved into our house in 2009. We are making adjustments to the house. We've put on a new roof, put a new front door in. We're redoing landscaping. All of this with the belief that our house would be across from this open space and be able to benefit from this open space in the time that we do sell in 10 or 20 years. And I just wanted to voice my opposition to the overall plan. And in listening to all that's been said, it's been my understanding that there are so many different points where there can be adjustments made, not just an overall refusal of the whole plan, that I would imagine that every point would be considered as for change and not just it all be voted on yea or nay. So I encourage you to vote no on this. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Is the commission ready to hear rebuttal testimony? We'll take a break till 9:30. It's now 9:22. Ladies and gentlemen, the commission is ready to hear rebuttal testimony.
I didn't ask for that ball. He gave it to me. I consider it a bribe. If I were you. Do you know Dartman? Oh, sorry. We're continuing.
If you wish to hear the testimony, please come in and sit down. If you are not interested, the lobby is a good place to talk.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you need it, but if you do.
Thanks,
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Peters, members of the Plan Commission, thank you. Good evening. My name again is Howard Zweig. I'm with Drinker Biddle and Wreath, and I'm here representing Presbyterian Homes. We appreciate the opportunity, even given the hour tonight, to present some rebuttal testimony. I want to remind everybody that in our March hearing, we went through slides. Each witness in their testimony referred back to the standards for a planned development and checked off each box showing how we had satisfied those standards. Rather than being repetitive tonight, we won't go back through those, but we will address some of the questions and concerns that have come up in the public comment in April, in the meeting on May 2nd when we listened, and as we listen tonight. The first issue that I would like to address, Mr. Chairman, is the covenant. There is no covenant. There is zoning. There is zoning that was referred to, the Ordinance 11061 and 68093. Both of those are zoning ordinances. 1993 ordinance specifically released condition number 7 from Ordinance 11061. Released that condition, so there is no restriction whatsoever on that corner, either with garages or buildings or anything. Presbyterian Homes gifted Cartwright Park, and that park is on the northwest corner. In fact, I would like to give you a memo that outlines all of this. The other thing I would like to refer to, Mr. Chairman, is the 1960 zoning ordinance and the zoning map from the city of Evanston. And it shows, in fact, that the interior of Presbyterian Homes property was zoned R5. It was represented that that was R4, it is R5, and there is a perimeter around that that was zoned R1. Would like to submit a copy of that to you as evidence, Mr. Chairman.
Staff, have you had a chance to look at the map that was just submitted? Is it in fact a zoning map?
Yes, Craig Sklar,
1960.
General Planner. It's actually a map that city staff has on record. It's part of our historical documents in the zoning office. It's available for public viewing.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask of this witness to explain in a little more detail the R1 perimeter
Yes.
to which he has just referred? Because I can't see very well here with no lights.
I apologize.
Could you just
It's
describe
simply-
it?
Yeah, it shows a perimeter. I can't tell from, there isn't a scale there, but it's approximately 100 feet. That is R1 around the perimeter of the property on
Is
on the
that
map.
outside the property?
No, that is within
that
the
is
property.
within.
So it was a ring around the property with the interior of the site zoned R5.
I see. Thank you.
Then, Mr. Chairman, in 1993, as a part of the comprehensive zoning amendment of the city of Evanston, the Presbyterian Homes property was rezoned to R4, all of it. There is no ring around the property at R1. There's no R5. In fact, the R5 was downzoned to R4. The entire property is zoned R4, and I have a copy of that map. The city has authority to undertake that. Notice was given to all residents of the city of Evanston. The zoning happened. So, Mr. Chairman, what you have is R4 zoning. We comply with the R4 zoning. We've shown you how we comply, and we'll, in fact, go through some of that again tonight. But there's no obligation under the R4 zoning to provide public open space. It's not a fact. The R4 zoning is what controls, and this body has authority to change the zoning. So that, I think, puts one issue behind us. There is no covenant. Now, what I'd like to do, we have several of our experts with us tonight who can address some of the other issues that came out. Mr. Maroos from Maroos and Company, Mr. Doran, Mr. Talty, and Mr. Ferrez, but we'll start with Mr. Maroos.
Good evening. I am Michael Maroos. I had spoke at the initial presentation in regard to valuation impact of the proposed development, and gone through and submitted a report in regard to that issue. Tonight, I'm going to touch on a few other points that were raised and hopefully can answer the questions. First of all, there was an issue as to 20 years of construction and what was the value impacts during that. I had met and gone over with the entire development team and gone over that issue. In fact, the actual construction is going to be in stages, in short spurts, and actually is not going to start immediately. It's also going to be sensitive to the community and to the neighborhood in regard to that. So that was my assumption. I am familiar with Lake Forest Place, and most of Lake Forest Place was kind of built in an open area, so there was no natural landscaping. My assumption for landscaping and architecture and aesthetics had to do with my review and meeting with Camaros, the land planner, and landscape architects, and OKW, the architects in regard to their proposed development. As an appraiser, I think I've appraised over 10,000 properties. A 2.5-story building is one with 2 full stories and generally a partially finished third, or maybe you could be aggressive and state you have a building that sticks out, a very high basement with 2 floors above. This does not have a basement. It's got 1 full floor and an attic on the 2nd floor. So I'm absolutely confused as to the practicality of that being considered a 2.5-story building. Another point that I would like to request from Virginia Mann when she talked about square footage and looking at her house, and she acknowledged she had a plat of survey that her house is 2,300 square feet. I would like to review that because I think that's absolutely incorrect. But that's just based on her comment. There was also a comment made by, I think, Mr. Depew, and hopefully I didn't mispronounce his name, who he talked about economic impact, and the 37 acres is equivalent to 16 city blocks. A city block is generally 300 by 600, plus you have to have streets, which are generally 66 feet of right-of-way. They're basically about 6 acres. So 6 acres would mean practically that the whole entire development is probably 6 city blocks, not 16. And I guess I missed the economic impact comparing the school impact of these houses because anybody that's looked at economic impacts, it's generally impact of the cost of education, and I have seen no facts that there's going to be grade and high school children in this development. I had a previous commitment, so I was not here at the beginning, but I hear there was a criticism in regard to some of the comparables utilized. One of the comparables, or as I listen to testimony, and I heard people that lived from a year, but generally people lived 8 to 15 years or more. Our quarterback, I think it was much longer than that. Our study, generally, we're considering comparables of 1 to 3 years. One of the last speakers lived at 2301 Lawndale. That comp was in our report. Uncertainty, absolutely, I agree. Obsolescence is a key issue, and if you let this facility deteriorate and have obsolescence, just as the building we're sitting in, you're going to have economic problems that's going to affect the entire neighborhood and community, and I base that on my experience. My report went in and provided documentation as to absorption periods, and yes, I also acknowledge the real estate market has been awful the last 3 years, but this particular neighborhood has essentially maintained its values and had very strong absorption in relation to the market in general and the community in general. My assumptions, again, a high-quality project, well-designed, well-managed. Some of what I heard tonight and I heard at the last meeting, I think go into some construction issues and they go into some management issues. And I assume that Evanston is going to make sure that they're going to control that. Obviously, a poorly designed, underfunded project is not going to be a benefit to the neighborhood. But as an appraiser, we look at what's been there. And this project, in one form or fashion, whether we go back 100 years or we go back to what we heard starting in 1933, has a tremendous history and service in this neighborhood. So these were the basis of my opinions and as an appraiser of over 35 years and having done significant work in this area and this community. And my conclusions are in the report, and I don't think I need to go through them. I still stand by my opinion that as planned, there will be no negative impact on value based on this project. And yes, during construction, as with any construction project, there's going to be noise, there's going to be disruption. It happens. Anybody that's driven the roads, IDOT is making it miserable for all of us. It's part of what we deal with living in the Chicago metropolitan area. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, good evening, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Tim Doran. I'm Director of Transportation for Gewalt Hamilton Associates. And if I may just address some of the questions that came up about traffic, there's always questions about traffic. And parking, if I may. First of all, let me just preface my remarks, and I said it last time or 2 meetings ago when I made my testimony, that we try and inject as much science as possible into traffic analyses and not conjecture or anecdotal evidence. Nobody likes traffic. I heard the former plan commissioner get up and say, every traffic engineer in the world will tell you there's no more traffic, no significant impact. I don't do that. I have a great reputation in the city and throughout the county area where I testify. If I didn't think there wasn't going to be more traffic, I would tell you there's more traffic and here's how we're going to handle it. But the truth is we have a net reduction in units. There's a reduction at 1 Kelvin where we are combining the units and reducing them from 145 units we're down 65 units to 80 units. So we're reducing units there. We've taken the 59 cottages and reduced to 54. There is a reduction of units on site. Intuitively, intellectually, or from an engineering perspective, that means a reduction in people, spaces, and so on. Now, I deal in standards. There is no standard that I know of dealing with senior housing. No standard that I know of dealing with senior housing that says when you go from 1,400 feet or 1,000 square feet to 2,000 square feet, you exponentially increase people and therefore it exponentially increase traffic. Now, I suppose someone can argue intuitively, more people, more cars. That's not the way these things operate. And if you look at the campus as a whole, which is what I would believe if I was a neighbor I'd look at, the campus as a whole, we are reducing units. And the campus as a whole, for every 3 units, produces a car an hour. Every 3 units produces 1 car an hour. So when we reduce, it's the reverse of that. We reduce units, we reduce. For every 3 we reduce, we're reducing a car an hour. And I'm not here to stand here before you and say, oh, let's minimize traffic. And there was a story about the accident out in front and so on. Those occur at non-senior events and non-senior units too. So I just want to make sure that we deal with standards. Your engineers and your traffic engineering department reviewed my traffic study, and I don't want to minimize it, but there is a reduction in units, and intuitively, intellectually, logically, there will be a reduction in traffic. If I may address some of the other comments that were made, units, residences, no, we talked about that. Parking, we'll talk about parking a little bit. Overall, there will be a significant increase in parking. And if I may get those numbers, I'd like to read them to you. There will be a net increase of 119 new spaces from the 34 cottages. There will be 2 in the garage. Let me explain it to you. There'll be 2 in the garages and 2 on the apron. Now, there are parking spaces out on the perimeter roadway, which was referred to, that are being removed. Some of the old garages are being removed. However, there is an increase in 3 Arbor, which is the proposed building, the 36 unit of 90 spaces. So there will be a net increase in 155 spaces campus-wide. 155 spaces campus-wide. The majority of that increase, of course, will be on the east side of the property at the new units and in 3 Arbor. Our proposal is to move some of the outside perimeter parking down into the extra spaces in the underground garage at 3 Arbor and move some of the surface spaces, parking areas now for employees and for visitors downstairs underneath. So there will be, again, there will be a net increase in parking spaces, and we will remove some of those employee spaces and visitor spaces into the basement. I guess just generally, there was discussion about circulation and the relationship of the circulation road. Someone called it a service drive. It's not a service drive. It's essentially located very similar and very close to where the new roadway will be located, albeit private. It is not a service drive. It is a local street for us. And the existing one is, and the new one will be. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is John Talty. I'm with OKW Architects, and I, too, am here to clarify some points and to walk us through some images that will hopefully add to that clarity as we go on. One of the questions that continually comes up is the notion of this construction schedule. We're sensitive to it. We recognize it. We want to be realistic about it, and we want to address it appropriately. And so this is an image that everyone has seen, and it identifies a priority, a zone of priority on the eastern edge of this campus, where as time goes on, vacancies occur, and the marketing kicks in, we are committing to building those units first. And trust me when I say we want to build them as fast as humanly possible. We want to do this. It's to the benefit of the Presbyterian homes. It's certainly a benefit to the neighborhood. We spoke about the fact that we're going to start either in the northeast or the southeast corner. But here is a sample condition of how this might manifest itself over the next several years. In this particular graphic, we're not doing anything until the year 2014. We're saying that simply because we have a process by which we have to go through with the city. We respect that. We anticipate going through that in 2011. Then, and only then, when we understand what it is that we're going to be doing, the marketing team from the Presbyterian Homes is going to go out and is going to test that market. And yes, they have been working at this already in an attempt to strategize and make this first step into the building of these cottages as efficient and effective as possible. Vacancies occur, residents move out, they move across campus, or some of them unfortunately pass away. The tax rolls represent single residents in some of these units. Yeah, they are. That's because their spouses are either living in another circumstance within the Pres home, a more assisted living condition, or they've passed away. But the new residents that are coming into these cottages, more often than not, will be couples with 2 cars. I'll let Nancy Tolan speak more specifically about the resident profile. But the intent is, between the vacancies and the marketing efforts, which could take a year, to amass as many of these units as possible. Then they're going to release the design team to execute the drawings, get them into the city for permit, vet the drawings, and making sure that they meet the standards that are set forth in this plan development document, and then construction can begin. Once the first phase of those units are built, along with the associated improvements to the roadway and landscape along the eastern edge, and Scott Ferris from Lakota can speak about that, we move along that edge and continue to build units. Perhaps 3 buildings or 6 units at a time. Perhaps it's more. Hopefully it would be. Until ultimately the entire corridor along Lawndale is constructed, fully landscaped, fully improved, all utilities, all buildings, all landscape at both the buildings and the perimeter. We try to offer a schedule to this event. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know where the market is going. We're confident that we have a product that there will continue to be a need for, and that people will want to continue to live at the Presbyterian homes. But we try to offer as realistic a view and honest a view of this circumstance as possible. So in terms of this zone of priority, we're talking about today, here we are in 2011, completing it in 2018. That's 7 years from now. The reality of it is, in that 7-year period, there's 34 months of construction and 58 months of no activity. The notion of it being this continual rollout of backhoes and earth movers and construction equipment and jackhammers is incorrect. There's going to be construction, it's going to stop, marketing will continue, they're going to amass more units. They don't want to do these one at a time. If the intent was to build one building at a time, I might agree with some of that dialogue, but that is not the intent. The intent is to build as many at a time as possible so that we can effectively move through that Lawndale corridor and get that zone of priority complete. So over that period of time, far more than half that time will be inactivity and will be conditions much as though they understand and appreciate today. There was a comment tonight made that said the history of the Presbyterian home was predicated on providing a place to live for older residents with modest means. I will tell you that that still exists at the Presbyterian homes, and again, Nancy Tolan can speak of the benevolence and the type of resident profile that the community offers. But what we wanted to demonstrate with this slide is, again, as Tim just spoke of, we're not playing with numbers. This is no smoke and mirrors event. The number of units at the Pres home is going to reduce with this proposed project. The resultant is 137 units, which we're calling modest residential units. Modest being defined by 360 to 1,110, or 360 to 1,100 square feet. 66% of those 137, 2/3 of that number, is less than 900 square feet. I would say 360 to 900 square feet is a very modest senior residence. There's 138 units on campus with this proposed project that we'll call market appropriate. That ranges from 1,435 to 2,300 square feet. Those units are found in 1 and 2 Arbor Lane, the proposed 3 Arbor Lane, and in the 54 cottages. The largest of those units, the 2,300 square feet, is not in the cottages. The largest units are actually found in 2 and 3 Arbor, in the apartment buildings. So we want to demonstrate that there's a balance on campus. This isn't a destination for the rich and famous. This is a destination for all types of seniors to find a great place to live and live for the remainder of their days through a continuing community. We've talked about these cottages. There's 5 units that we've spoke of over and over again that can be conjoined in a number of ways. Yes, the residents can choose the units they choose. They choose the units they wish to live in. However, the exterior imagery, the skin of these buildings will be determined by us, by the Presbyterian homes, by this body, by the city of Evanston, so that we do not promote this monotony along Lawndale or within the context of the campus. They can choose a floor plan, but the exterior of the building will be predetermined as time goes on based upon the makeup of that streetscape. And we'll use real brick, real stone, and real timber. The buildings, when they're conjoined, those 5 units, if you put the smallest unit adjacent to the smallest unit or the biggest next to the biggest, that footprint, including the garage, the farthest most point, those buildings range from 76.8 to 102 feet wide to 67.10 to 77.3 deep. They are what they are. We're not hiding. We're not trying to mask anything. We're not trying to play any games. There's been a lot of discussion regarding, is this a cottage? Is this a 1-story house? Is this a 1.5-story house? we created an exhibit that talks about that very issue. Understanding that both in R1 and R4 zoning districts, we are allowed to build a residence with a mean height of the roof, mean height meaning the point between the highest point and the spring point of that roof, of 35 feet. Here's what I would identify as a one-story building. This is analogous to our existing cottage. It's one story of residence with a shallow pitched roof. This is a 1.5-story proposed cottage that we're talking about on site. It has 1 story of exterior materials. It is lived on the ground floor, and it has occupiable space in the roof. The dormers represent that occupiable space. That can be storage. It can be used, it can be built out if they so choose. The buildings that we're proposing, those cottages, range from 31 to 34 feet to the highest point on the roof, below, far below, the allowable mean height that's allowed in R4 zoning and in R1 zoning. A 2-story house is 2 full floors of exterior wall material that extend to the underside of that roof. In this case, we have a more shallow pitched roof where the attic space is not occupiable. Those heights vary. A 2.5-story house is, again, 2 full floors of exterior wall materials with an occupiable attic space, whether it be for storage or rooms or bedrooms or offices or whatever you might want to choose to put in there. And again, it can be built to a mean height of 35 feet. I would argue that that building could probably, to the peak, be built as high as 46 or 47 feet to the very peak, depending upon the roof slope that you choose. The vast majority of the homes east of our property are 2-story and 2.5-story residences. And I contend that the cottages that we're proposing are 1.5-story buildings. Let's talk about context. Context is a very debatable issue. Context comes in many shapes and sizes. This is a figure ground analysis of the region, the area in which we're talking. Here's our campus, obviously. This represents 1,000 feet from our property line in every direction. You can look at context as a macro condition. We have a state highway, as was identified earlier in Gulf Road. We have institutions of churches and schools. We have an institution that is the Presbyterian homes. We have beautiful, no argument here, really beautiful, what I said to Ross in the conversation on the phone the other day, a destination neighborhood. That's how I would define it. Lovely single-family homes. Lovely single-family homes to the north and to the west as well. They're different. This is more dense than that is. These are more affordable than these are. It doesn't make them bad. They're equally nice in the context of a great community like Evanston. So we go from a macro sense of context to a more micro sense of context. Let's talk about our own campus. We have apartment buildings adjacent to apartment buildings. We have cottages adjacent to cottages, townhomes adjacent to townhomes on the west side of the property. So that the campus itself, the 33 acres, has a context unto itself. Now we talk about context as a function of edge. The Gulf Road edge to our campus, I don't think there'd be any argument in here, is very different from the other 3 sides of the site. Grant Street has its own personalities. Lawndale, we've spoken about at great length, is a very special corridor, and it has its own personalities. So we can talk about context as a function of all those edges. This is a slide that's appeared in PowerPoints in the past before this body, and we look at 4 beautiful homes all sitting east of our campus. Variety of styles, materials, types, really lovely homes. And I would argue that they are context within our community. These are 6 images that are also context immediately adjacent to our property. This is a garage to the west side of our campus. This is the alley immediately north of our campus along Grant Street. This is a really interesting 60s modern frame structure that's on Grant Street, immediately across the street from us. Just to the east of that is a single-story clay tile roof, flat roofed residence. We have a 1.5-story cottage to the west side of us. We have this is Dr. Paleologis' house, I believe, to the east side of us, and her 3 garage doors. That's context too. So it's unfair to cherry pick the notion of context and say, well, context is a beautiful stone home a block east of your development. This too is context. All of this goes to the notion of context as it pertains to architecture as being a very subjective thing. There's also the notion of context as a function of typology. Here's our proposed project. Here's our 3 arbor, 4- and 3-story apartments, cottages at the perimeter. Here's 3 crowns down the street, down Grant Street, 5 blocks perhaps, whatever the distance is. It too is 3- and 4-story apartments, close to the street, I might add. And so you could compare, as a function of context, a CCRC on the west side of Grant to a CCRC 5 blocks east. Again, subjective dialogue. What I don't think is subjective is context as a function of zoning. So with that, I'm going to turn the dais over to Scott Ferris and allow him to talk about context as a function of zoning and the R1 and R4 districts around this campus.
Excuse me, can I ask for clarification on something?
Go ahead.
I'd like to understand better. We were held to addressing specific requirements of the law, and they seem to be going on and on about all different types of topics without facts but opinions. And I think all of us would like to get home at some hour that's reasonable tonight. So could you clarify what the rules actually are, or are they different?
Rules are that they are allowed to put in rebuttal testimony. You talked about this, that's
Context. That was a response.
You talked about the neighborhood and the relation of the proposal to the neighborhood. Now they are talking about the neighborhood and the relation of the proposal to the neighborhood. And the testimony is not the same as your testimony. You will have a chance to ask them questions.
We're good to go? My name is Scott Ferris. I'm a principal at the Lakota Group in Chicago. As John mentioned, context takes many forms and shapes, and as we talk, and I think one of the questions that just came up was subjectivity. Certainly is the case. We're trying to inform and educate the commission and our neighbors how we see this and how we see us fitting into the community. But what there is, and what I'm going to talk about briefly, is context and reality of factual data and what's supported by your zoning. Howard alluded to it before. We are working within the confines of what we know to be the zoning parameters. We're also working within the confines of the larger framework of the comprehensive plan of the city, which clearly states that institutions and neighborhoods need to get along together, work together, and should coexist in a peaceful manner. And certainly we are trying to define that this evening in our testimony.
Are you going to use slides?
Yeah.
Okay. Otherwise, I'd say let's turn on the lights.
You know, can I just run through these? It'd actually be easier for me to read this off here. John alluded to the context of zoning. Certainly, as alluded to, we are surrounded by R1 zoning. We are R4 zoning. Howard described the history of us moving over time and through different zoning districts. But what we are today is we're R4. We're an institutional campus. We're a senior congregate care campus. We provide a range of services which you know of and we've identified. And we have a variety of housing styles and product types on our project and continue to provide that. There was a question this evening about not providing different housing types. We do. We provide housing for the seniors community, not for the market rate single-family residential. Our plan has modified over the duration of the last Plan Commission meeting. There's some minor tweaks and discussions which I'll bring before this evening. Our response to some of the neighbors' concerns at our listening session last week and also to some of the concerns from Plan Commission last month. We are 90 units, as we talked about. The plan implies that. We have made substantial changes, which I'll identify, and are further identified in a packet that we submitted to the Plan Commission earlier this evening on behalf of staff to identify the history of our communication dialogue with the community as well as with the city. So you have that before you, and I'll walk through that very briefly because I recognize the hour is late. What we do know is zoning. And we made this matrix. We hope this helps clarify things. It helps us understand where we are and how we fit in. There's a big word that's used a lot here tonight and maybe used in a lot of different veins. That's intensity. Intensity is also called density, called a lot of different things. Intensity is how much fits on the site. There is an allowable defined measure of what's allowed to fit on the site. It's defined by your zoning. We have identified what we call the core principles or standards of zoning. There's a lot more than this, but these are really the fundamentals of what we're talking about and some of the concerns, that being our total lot area, our project area, the minimum zoning lot area of an R1 and an R4. Those are critical factors. The minimum zoning lot width, how wide can a lot be on a particular zoned property. The yard requirements, we heard about setbacks. There's a concern about setbacks versus green space, ours versus theirs, right-of-way green space versus our green space, buffer green space. A lot of miscalculations or misunderstandings about what's what. I want to try to find that. We talk about mean building height. John just alluded to that in terms of what we're allowed to the mean portion of the roof. Building lot coverage as calculated against the entire site area. The FAR. We put it up here. It's a term used in a lot of communities. I think plan commissioners understand. FAR is floor area ratio. It's not defined by your zoning, but it calculates the amount of bulk that you can put on a property. It's one of the concerns that's come up, and it is not defined in your zoning code. We're going to try and define that. We've been trying to define that through our testimony and dialogue. Impervious coverage, building coverage on the site, as I remarked, and also parking requirements. Briefly, if I can walk through each of these, in the R1 and R4, for the most part, they're very similar with regards to the yard setback requirements. Let's jump to those very quickly. Front yard requirements, 27 feet. Side yard, street side yard requirements, 15 feet. Interior side yards between 5 and 10. Rear, 30 and 25. The PD, which is the middle bar, allows some allowances above and beyond that per your ordinance. We've identified that in this area. The one area that's important for us as we look to this is our apartment building. Our 3 Arbor building allows us to go an additional 12 feet above the allowed 35 feet or 2.5 story requirements. And that's the same for both the R1 and the R4. If you look at lot area, the minimum lot area in an R1 district, we'll talk about this in just in a minute, is 5,000 square feet. If you're in an R1 district, you can build a 5,000 square foot lot. If you're in an R4 district, I'm sorry, R1 is 7,200 square feet. If you're in R4, you can build a 5,000 square foot lot. To find out where we fit in with our proposal, we took our area, our site area, which represents about 12 acres of our site. That's our 90 units, pulled it apart, and we divided it by what the zoning allotment was, and we came out with an average lot size of about 6,800, 6,900 square feet. So we're right in the range, actually more towards the R1 average lot size. Quickly, let's look at the requirements for minimum lot width. If you were to take all of our 3 sides, our context, north, that being the area along Grant, east along Lawndale, and south along Simpson or Gulf Road, you took that frontage, that length, and you divided it by the minimum standards of a front yard setback, those 35 feet, you would find that in almost all cases, we exceed by almost double the average lot width if we were to build single-family homes on our property. That being, for instance, on Grant, we have 5 units, or about 89 feet per lot. Along Lawndale, 19 units, or 65 feet per lot. And along Gulf, at about 65 feet per lot. It's almost double what the lot requirement is by the zoning district. With regards to the setbacks, in every instance around our property from a setback requirement, we exceeded by double, 3 times, in some instances even 4 times the required distance. So we are exceeding all of the standards by which we are forced to live within with regards to your zoning. And I think we've communicated that effectively, but we want to reiterate it because it's very, very important in terms of defining intensity and density. We meet with the standards of increased building coverage about 5% over the site. We meet with the minimum mean average height. Our cottages, 26 to 28 feet, mean average height to the roof, not the top, but the mean. And the top of our flat roof apartment building, which, as John mentioned, is a 4-story step down to 3 stories, is 45.5 feet, so it's below the allowance under that 12 feet for the PUD. Parking and also impervious coverage clearly meet within the standards by a far margin. Briefly, our current site plan, as we talked about, and then if we drop in those parameters just to identify what I'm talking about when I showed you the numbers, our closest point setback on the north, 52 feet, up at Grant, 53 feet down the south is our closest point from our setback. And let me just be clear, that is from our property line. There is still, from our property line to the edge of this single-loaded street, Lawndale, there's another 22 to 25 feet of green space. So really, the effective feel is much further than what the setback allows for. 59 on Gulf at Calvin, there's the height of 3 Arbor, and there's the average height of the homes that are our cottages around the interior and exterior of our property. Density, intensity, density, a lot of different nomenclatures. We heard some numbers brought before tonight. I hope to clarify some of those numbers so that we can be spot on with actual factual numbers and defining things. Our site, 33 acres, we've identified 296 units, which is in the PD application reviewed by the city. It's actually going to be less than that as we narrow down our units, as everybody has described, but we're using the higher number at this point, and we actually have about a density of 8.9 dwelling units per acre. These are just benchmark numbers to use as comparisons. When we look at our site, our development site, or our PUD site, 12 acres, 90 units, we're about 7.4 dwelling units per acre. And if we do a little theoretical calculation, we say take 3 Arbor out, take 36 units of apartments out, and just talk about the buildings, that what we call our single-family character, our transition zone, we're at about 5.1 dwelling units per acre, okay? Now let's look at our context of our neighbors, okay? These are typical city blocks. We didn't make up any fuzzy math or any lines. We put a red bar around everybody else's block. We used the right-of-way lines like we used our right-of-way lines. We left roads out so they weren't included, and we netted out alleys where alleys were defined. Folks to the north of us, R1, smaller lots, allowed, character, fit in the neighborhood context, 7.7 dwelling units per acre. To the east, along Lawndale, very different character, bigger homes, bigger lots, a bigger feel, more openness, 4.0 dwelling units per acre. And the folks to the south of us, just for comparison, about 4.7 dwelling units per acre. Our homes, if I can toggle back here just a second. There we go. Our homes, by themselves, separating out the apartment, are at 5.1, just slightly higher than what our neighbors are in terms of a density or intensity based on a calculation. Not a feel, but a numerical coefficient that represents it. With everything back in, about 7.4, R4 to R1. There's our site, 90 units, 7.4 dwelling units per acre. We heard loud and clear last time from one of the commissioners asking the neighborhood, what would you like to see there? And we said to ourselves, okay, what if we looked at that and said, okay, that's 8.7 dwelling units per acre. The hypothetical calculations against the net divided by the 5,000 square feet R4 zoning, we could put 105 single-family homes on that property. Theoretically, put 105 single-family homes on that property. What we did for comparison purposes, we dropped in the neighborhood footprint to the north, the 7.4 dwelling units per acre, R1. We took that gridded road and we brought that right on down, not to do any monkey business, not to draw plans, make it look, just to take what's there and drop it on our site. These are the smaller lots, they're allowed. We identified that Lawndale now, in a traditional single-family neighborhood, is a street, double-fronted street. There's no public green space other than the fact that it is a public right-of-way and everybody has access to it, and there would be homes fronting on it. And those homes would have 25-foot front yards, and they would have side yard requirements, and they have all the setbacks. To show you, this is 7.7 dwelling units per acre. That's what we are proposing with our plan. Even though it looks different and it doesn't have the same feel, we're an institution, we are not a single-family development. We have not denied that. That's what we are, and we want to move forward with that character and do it in a sensitive, caring, artistically approach that meets with everybody's approval. Landscape discussion, important to note and to clarify. Again, in all full faith and honesty, we've been challenged, but I will tell you that we're actually taking 210 trees down, not 195 trees. And we are not tree cutters, and we have residents that live in our community that look out every day at those trees and are going to be very, very sad to see some of them go because they won't have a lifetime to watch the new ones grow. That being the case, there was some concern about our land planning and sensitivity to landscaping, and I can assure you our goal behind our plan was to drop footprints back where we were taking them off to the extent possible that we could save and preserve trees on our perimeter. We saw lots of pictures this evening about the perimeter elm trees. Yes, they're important, and they're important to us, and we are going to save them. They're that public green space that everybody talks about on the perimeter. They're there. They're in our preservation plan. And the other part that's important in our philosophy of preservation is to preserve what's on the inside, our core area, because all of our residents are going to be looking on that too. We keep forgetting that we have our residents and what their concerns and needs are as they live in this neighborhood as well. We've defined the trees that come out by ill health, poor condition, poor quality. Some of that is age-related, some of that's disease-related. I don't think it's a function of bad arboricultural practices. However, I'm sure that you can't keep up with everything, and nature takes its course and things die. We certainly work at trying to do a good job at taking care of the overall landscape of the campus. The trees that we're preserving, there's 257 of those that we're preserving. Important to note that this is the plan that we're putting back into place. It shows only trees at this point. It doesn't show all the foundations and all the things that are still going to go in around each and every one of the buildings as defined by the palette and the character that we submitted last time to you that defined the sizes, the species, the character, and the minimum standards, what's going to go back in here. This represents our tree replacement plan on our project, which calls out for 450 new trees to go back in, more than what we're taking out, with a variety of evergreens, ornamentals, and deciduous shade trees. The caliper inches, the spacing, and the preservation techniques that occur here have to meet with your standards set by your new forestry and preservation practices. We recognize that, and in fact met with the forester last week to tour our plan, the campus, and what we can do to make it all work and work with the city to ensure that we meet certain standards applied to the PD. The landscape plan in general showing the overall character. What I want to highlight in here just briefly that came out of our discussion, a listening session and discussions, was the need to revisit our landscape buffer. John talked about it. I'm going to talk about it just briefly here. We've heard around and around and around a tremendous amount of back and forth. I think one of our residents said dense, light, dense, open. We've responded to all those, and at the end of the day, we believe to respond to the community in general and really the concerns for the appearance of our garages, we're better presenting a plan that I have before you that has more intensity of landscaping, more evergreen material, more blockage of the view into our site. That doesn't preclude open space that the community can enjoy where it is today. The big elm trees, the public parkway is still going to have the same green space. We're not going there. In fact, our solution would be to put this in as soon as we start the project at one time, the entire buffer, meaning that this buffer goes in before we even start moving with all of the homes in one fashion, so that it's there. It's a known entity. It provides the block, the greening, the screening, the buffering of the dust and the noise and all the other concerns, which are valid. We believe that's a sensible solution, and it provides surety that you don't have to worry about what's going on the other side in our little area. Just a quick picture, the community open space referred to, which has been defined as our area, but our setbacks. Again, we want to show that we have made an attempt, not only in our current land plan, to give back some green space up there. I think last time we came over, we brought a plan that brought 8 more feet of green space in there. It doesn't sound like a lot. Small numbers don't mean anything to anybody, but please take a look at the character of this. While we're all throwing pictures around, let's look at the vision of how our road's going to fit into that space. That's our new road. That's where it's coming to. That's the character of landscaping moving around it. There still is community green space, less, albeit less. There is still community green space. We are still looking across this and open sight lines to neighbors using this for dogs and kids and everything to play out here. We still see our neighbors across the street. There's our neighbor across the street. We see garages. We're not screening the garages. We know they're there. They're part of the flavor, the character of the neighborhood. We recognize it's a concern looking in, and we want to provide a landscape that solves a solution to that. Let's just talk briefly about forestry. We walked with the forester, as I mentioned. We toured it. We resolved issues relating to preservation particularly, but also the species, make sure we're using the right stuff. Let's talk about Prospect Avenue. We took it very personally last time that we didn't meet the standards that we hold for ourselves and the quality of the landscape and implementation. I do want to submit, if I can, into record, Mr. Chairman, what I would call pictures of fairness. These are the same pictures that they're shown, but they have leaves on them. If we could go back and look through their show, which was a well-done show, all the pictures of the neighbors' homes had lovely beautiful landscaping, beautiful homes, but it was all in the nice time of year with greenery. Everything we are pointed out to, whether it's Lake Forest, whether it's is all in the middle of winter with sticks, and it's not fair. We live in the Midwest. Let's just be honest. The reality of it is we have met the standards. We walked with the forester. He complied that we met with the standards. Yes, we have garages, but the streetscape character is heavily planted. And when it leaves out, it's beautiful. Maybe it could use some more evergreens. Granted, that's neither here nor there, but we intend to make sure that we do meet with what we say we're going to do here and at Lake Forest.
What is depicted, where that is, and what is depicted and when it was taken?
This was taken today, if I'm correct, and it was a picture looking northbound on Prospect at the same areas to show the parkway condition. We're standing in the street looking back towards the houses. All the trees are leafing out now. There's an understory canopy of shrubs that are here. It's the same grouping of maples that are down the street. And I just show you this because, and here's one from further away so we can be intellectually honest and say, yeah, further away you're going to see more building than if you're standing up close. But it shows the same character. So I'd like to submit that into record so we can
Greg,
resolve.
Can you mark that as Petitioner's Exhibit 1, the date? Craig will.
Or I'll give it to Craig. I'm sorry. Here, thank you, Howard. The Lake Forest, just briefly, the picture that were taken from the older section of Lake Forest, there's a newer section of Lake Forest that was planted very heavily. It, again, was wintertime. It's a very successful project. We would certainly like you to contact the city. We talked to Craig and city staff and said, please contact the city and ask their forester and their development folks if we met with the standards or exceeded the standards in our belief with that. Lake Forest, just briefly, is 40 acres. We talked about 100 cottages. There's also 200 multifamily apartment buildings. So when you add that up, that's 300 units, 40 acres. You net out the open space, but you're at 7.9 units per acre, the same exact thing we're doing here. So there's really no difference in that CCR that we've already developed before than what we're developing here. And just some pictures of the character around the site. This is as it's maturing and leafing out. We just wanted, we're starting to get the pictures. We were taking successive pictures as it leafed out around the property.
What was that?
That was the same stuff I just turned into you, but a couple different ones as it started to leaf out. Yeah, this was
Evanston or Lake Forest?
Oh, this is here. This is the pictures along Prospect. We were taking them in succession as all these plants were starting to leaf out up until today to show you that, in fact, there's a lot more there than one would see from any particular angle. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay. Community dialogue, you have before you a document that identifies a significant number of meetings that were held from 2008 till as of last week. They also include all of the Plan Commission meetings that we've had, Spark community meetings. The emphasis behind these was to define an exhibit. The exhibit shows the site plan that was presented at the time. The exhibit identifies the dates. For instance, this is just an example to show you community meeting number 1, February 21st, 2008. We had 19 residents attending that meeting. At that meeting, the plan presented 56 units of cottages, 36 units of apartments. You heard lovingly that we used to have our units in the corners. That was a no-no. We pulled those out. We identified neighborhood dialogue, the critical concerns and issues that people had. We documented that. Just to show you a successive meeting. The second meeting would say that we had 20 residents attend that meeting. This occurred April 17th of the same year, 2008. But we're showing that as we heard the concerns, we modified landscape buffer. We took out those two buildings out of the corners. Yes, we did add one back in for a net loss of 2 units. We continued to hear items of the views to the garages. The landscape was too dense in this case along Lawndale. This was when we were back in the 2 dense days. We came around to the 2 open days, and now we're back to the 2 dense days. Setback, a 3-arbor building, was a really big issue for people. We used to be at about 189 feet of a solid 4-story building. Neighbors were concerned. We made those changes. We've updated those changes, and they've occurred successively. We've identified all of those for you here, the topics of which were at the first meeting, removal of corner buildings. Second meeting, we came back with reorientation of that 3-arbor building to get 50 more feet off the setback and drop the sides down. Third meeting, when we came back in 2010, there was a hiatus when we retooled and rethought how we should be approaching this and what we needed to do to meet the needs of Presbyterian homes as well as the community. We curved the road and modified the landscape buffer. We came back and curved and tweaked the road again, but put in a little bit less landscaping. In the Plan Commission meeting, our very first one, since then we've added corner green space. We've defined building elevations and materials per direction and codified the elements that we're going to use as part of the process. We certainly have had our last Plan Commission meeting, and then we had an additional community meeting, which was our listening session just this past week. So all that information is before you. I'm not going to surmise the details of every one of them. The hour is late. But it is in a packet that we clearly define to make sure you're aware that we have had it. We take it seriously. We have made changes. Some of them were grand, and some of them were very small, but we continue to work towards the right path. To summarize very quickly, this is our current plan. This is our current landscape buffer, more density. The issues that we're still hearing, and I'm going to summarize those quickly: too dense. Buildings are too tall. This is what we've heard at the most recent meeting. Too many units, appearance of garages at views, phasing too long, traffic and parking problems, not contextual architectural styles. 3-arbor lane is too close again from our last meeting, so it's moved back up on the list. Don't construct sidewalks, more green space. Our current plan before you has taken the sidewalks out to put the green space in. But we heard, and we'll do the right thing based on what everybody feels, but we believe that right now we're hearing take those sidewalks out, and we want solid, more dense landscape buffer along Lawndale. We've put that in. We believe we've addressed all these issues, and we've tried to be clear, we've tried to be honest, and we've tried to provide factual data that supports it. I think we have. I think we've done our homework, and we look forward to more discussion with you to bring this forward. I'll turn it over to, there she is, Nancy.
Let me just clean up the exhibit problem.
Yes.
Is the slide that you've shown the same as the last page of the handout you gave the commission? And let me show it to you, because I want to...
The landscaping is a different landscape buffer on the one you have.
So if this is your current plan, how can we identify that for people looking at the record?
As part of our PowerPoint presentation, it would be the document that's included.
And how do we, there's been a lot of plans, how do we identify that page?
Well, yeah, we can call
You
it.
think I'm being silly, but...
No, you're right, yeah,
I'm
no.
confused.
May 11th, Plan Commission meeting, 2010, is what it says, that's what it says in the, no, May 11th, because the last one was May 2.
So you'll submit a copy of the PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah.
And we'll also take in evidence the presentation from the Northwest Evanston neighbors, and we'll ask to take into evidence also your slides, because they have color that's not in these.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, obviously, we're available to answer any questions that you have, and we would simply like to reserve some time for Ms. Tolan to summarize the project.
Let me ask the commissioners and others if they have questions of these witnesses or of the prior witnesses. And maybe we could have some light so we can see our notes.
Regarding the sidewalks, I guess I noticed for the first time that you had planned for a sidewalk on the Parkway going north and south on Lawndale. Is it your intention now to eliminate that sidewalk?
Take it out.
That's a good idea, I think. But I just wondered, what about the sidewalk?
Yeah, the staff had originally suggested that we put it in as part of long-range goals of the city to link neighborhoods and all. That's good policy. But what we heard resoundingly was the neighborhood wants green more than they want
It's
sidewalks.
such a lovely parkway there. It's
Right.
one of the
Why mess
nicest
it up?
parkways in the city. Yes, I would agree. Thank you.
Yeah.
We're happy to remove it.
Other questions from commission or public? Let me just see. Go ahead.
Yeah. I just have some questions, because I want to understand some things in this is open to the applicant and the response. Okay. With regards to the package that we received, I have some questions with regards to the section presented by Ms. O'Brien. Okay. Or maybe someone could answer it. Are the properties that are identified, for example, 3045 Normandy at Lawndale?
Yes.
Page 17, $1,200,000 plus?
Yes.
Is that a listing, a sale? Is that a list price or a sale price?
That is the sale price.
That is?
Yes, all of these are sale prices.
Those are all sale prices?
Yes, sir.
And when were those sale dates?
I don't have the dates. Some of the homeowners are here.
In the past 3 to 4 years.
3 to 4? Okay.
A couple of them may be longer. I'm not sure. Not all the residents are here. 3 to 6 years, okay.
Okay, thank you. And then with regards to the section violation of ordinances, Ms. Mann?
What page are you looking at?
Well, right now I'm going to page 44. The second bullet point, exterior 167 feet all around the property zoned R1.
Right.
Can you just share with me what's the basis for that?
That is what the zoning originally was that the exterior, and I believe they confirmed that this evening, that the exterior of the property was always zoned R1 for 167 feet.
Okay, and that's not an existing,
No, in 1993, when the city of Evanston looked at all of their zoning, they took it upon themselves to rezone it R4, not at the request of the Presbyterian homes or at the request of the neighbors, but on their own, because at some point there was a deal cut that allowed the current cottages, which are not R1, to be built there. And our contention is that if you look at 68093, that was done with the understanding that everything else would remain the same.
okay.
And so the R1, we believe, should stand. We don't know why that was changed. It was changed without any input from us.
Okay, is there any legislative history, any transcripts of any hearings or meetings that were held with regard to that?
I don't have that,
To show intent?
That was a comprehensive rezoning.
Yeah.
And there were 2 hearings, and with comprehensive rezoning, notices by publication, and there isn't notice to the property owners because all of Evanston
Right.
was rezoned and the text was changed. I attended the hearings. I'd have to review the transcripts, but I don't recall a discussion of this property.
Okay.
And our contention is that the 2 ordinances which I handed out today
Okay.
form a covenant that protects that type of zoning and that type of character for the community.
Well, and that's just, my next question is, with regard to covenants, I just want to understand something. Are you saying that there's a covenant within the deeds for all of the properties that
No.
are affected here?
No, not at all.
Not at
What
all,
I'm
okay.
saying is that these 2 ordinances specifically, Ordinance 680-93 and Ordinance 11-061, combined with the history of the property as zoned R1 on the exterior end of the property, created a covenant that assured the neighbors that anything built there would be in conformance to maintain the character of the community at large.
But what's in that ordinance is not in any of the deeds, correct?
I don't have a deed, I couldn't answer that.
Okay.
I don't have a deed in front of me, and we did not look at our deeds, so I don't know that.
Okay. To your recollection, when you purchased, was that something that you were made aware of, that ordinance?
I don't recall.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been there 16 years.
Okay.
Okay.
I can answer that, because I was actually concerned when I bought my house in 1990. So I actually did talk about that quite a bit, and about property lines and what could be built right across the street. And so I actually was aware that there was what was considered a covenant that ran with the land, and that the neighbors are considered the third-party beneficiary of that covenant, which runs with the land. So that was what I was told when I closed on my home, and I was told that nothing would be built there. Also, in 1990...
By who?
By, when we closed on the house, by the lawyers that were sitting there, and
Okay,
also by the lawyers.
Okay.
So I'd have to go back and look at, their exact names and everything. But that was part of the negotiation about my house, was related to what governed the land use right across the street.
Okay.
Also, the other one thing that I might add, and I don't know what the transcripts from the rezoning show, but what...
It was long ago, so
Yeah,
I
right.
don't know either.
But the understanding that we had was that the reason that got switched from R1 to R4 was not because there was an intent to use the land any different. It was because they were looking at what was there. And because there was an exception that was made after a denial to have those cottages not be single-family but multi, that technically speaking, it was... it was just looked at and said, oh, there's multifamily units on that land. It's R4, it's not R1. There was no intention to change the character of that perimetry and then allow for even bigger buildings. So it was just, this this isn't, these houses are multi-unit. That was what our understanding was, and so that's,
Okay.
I guess.
Thank you. I have some other question. Go ahead, Mr. Zweig.
If I can, Commissioner, as you, I'm sure, know, a covenant is a contractual agreement between two parties. It is recorded against the property, and it does run with the land. This is zoning. It is not a covenant. A covenant, a typical covenant in the city of Evanston, if you've looked at title to your house or commercial property, might prohibit alcoholic beverages. Common covenant. This is zoning. It was rezoned, and that was part of the evidence.
We have no evidence in the record of any covenant.
That's
We
correct.
only have evidence of 2 ordinances.
That's correct.
I
Thank you,
think the
Chairman.
record's pretty clear.
Okay. And on page 56,
You want to make a point to the last comment?
I wanted to ask Mr. Zweig something. Did the Presbyterian homes give their word to the neighborhood, when we compromised about the rec center, that they would not, just as as Dartman said, don't worry, we'll never build along Lawndale? Did they give their word in order to get us to compromise about that rec center? Yes or no? Because my recollection, the Dartman's recollection, Beatty Brady's recollection, we were all at those meetings, and they gave their word that they would never do this.
okay. Page 56. Ms. Mann, what is the definition of aged?
When I looked it up, I could not find a clear definition.
Okay.
It says someone of
But your definition,
extended age.
Your definition is that aged is not someone in their early 60s.
Correct. That's not somebody who is an active senior, still employed, going to work every day with possible adult children still living at home.
Okay. And then page 58, when was the photograph taken on page 58 of the house on the right?
Within the last month. It was taken, I mean, quite frankly, I didn't really know anything about this until about a month ago, maybe 5 weeks ago, and Alderman Tendem and I went up to Lake Forest, took these photos, looked at the property.
I'm concerned. I hope that you're not taking the tone because I sense it. I'm just trying to get information because our duty is to process information, and I would like to try to fill in some
just trying to
information
answer your question.
myself.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to make clear that
I'm not questioning your motivation, so I'm just trying to understand when the photographs, because I'd like to understand the similarities and differences.
For the record, I just want it to be clear that all of these photographs have been taken in the last 5 weeks. Most of them have been taken in the last 10 days.
Okay. And that would be the same for page 59 and 61 and 62?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. I don't have any other questions. I would just like to say one thing in closing in terms of the presentations, and that is I appreciate everybody's time that they've put into the presentations today. I appreciate the applicant and the witnesses that presented the information. It's voluminous and essential and critical to say the least, and obviously what we have to do here isn't easy, but we all take our position, our voluntary position, seriously. I want to pay particular credit to 2 individuals, and those are Mr. Ross Altman and Mr. Raffel. I don't know if he's still here, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I sincerely, as a commissioner, appreciated your comments for the quality of them and how they address what we're doing. And I appreciated it. They were comments that lacked snark, and what I have sensed in watching this hearing over the last 3 dates and going into the 10, 11 o'clock hour all the time, it is frustrating as a commissioner, and I'm a lawyer, been one for 16 years, and a litigator. It's very painful to have to listen to, snark. We have to decide and make a recommendation based on facts and standards. We don't do it as a matter of whim, and we don't do it carelessly. So I appreciate your comments, because I do have serious concerns with regards to the size and with regards to the appearance of the garages. And I believe that over the course of these 3 hearings, a lot of things have come to light that has been very helpful. And I understand the construction schedule. At the same time, I do appreciate and understand what the Presbyterian Homes is trying to do and the difficulty that they face logistically in trying to do it. But I felt that I wanted to point out that what you presented and what Mr. Raffel presented, I felt was very helpful, and I felt that it also evoked what I believe Evanston is about, which is civility and diplomacy in addressing disagreements about issues. So I want to thank everyone.
Are you accusing me of snark? Come on, buddy.
I apologize for actually not mentioning you, Mr. Dartman, but you were neither snark, maybe diplomatic, but more entertaining. No, but thank you. I didn't leave you out on purpose. All right. Thanks.
Excuse me, but I'm not sure then who you are referring to. We certainly tried to keep our presentation civil and factual and address all of the legal issues and keep it very unemotional, but using factual content where it is appropriate. And if people find that offensive, I'm really kind of dismayed by that.
We need to listen and consider everything that's been said tonight, and I think we will do so.
Okay.
I didn't point anyone out. I singled out a couple of individuals.
I understand that.
Other questions from the commission?
I have my light on.
Hello? To my understanding, I think the question that is still before us is simply this. Is the Presbyterian home within its right under the current zoning ordinance to construct the structures that you want to erect? And in the absence of a covenant, because the covenant has not been produced here, so we have to go with the ordinance, which is what is in effect. That is the decision that ought to be made, basically. Can they do it? If we go back to what Mr. Altman was saying, an open-ended construction cycle, it's a bit much. But if I recall from the Northwest side, neighbors also, Chairman Peters also recommended a while back that you guys actually speak and try and see what could be done to mitigate at least what appears to be extreme acrimony between the 2 groups. After all, you guys have to live together. I mean, the Presbyterian home isn't going anywhere. And they actually stepped down from R5 to R4. And under the current zoning, they can actually construct what they are proposing. But the question is this: how do we go back to the point? It just does not appear to be fair to say that if we sell 4 homes, we will build 4. We may not be able to sell 4 structures this year, so we will stretch it out until we have enough. So basically, that is where I think the negotiations ought to come in. You may not get everything that you're looking for from the Presbyterian homes, but it says R4, and that is what they are basically operating on.
So if I could make a point.
Yeah.
Covenant was just one part of our presentation. We addressed numerous issues in the zoning ordinance that we believe this proposal is in violation of. And we hope that you will look very carefully at those and look at their proposal before you make your decision, because we do believe, whether you agree with our issue on the covenant or not, that there are plenty of ordinances that still apply, including the one 68093, which they contend does not exist and eliminates any restrictions on them building. But in fact, if you look at the second page of what I handed out today, and you look at where it says, the leave is granted subject to compliance with all other provisions of the zoning ordinance, other applicable laws, and the following conditions, and it goes on to reiterate the conditions that we addressed earlier. So that's one issue. To address your issue about willing to meet with them.
I'm going to ask, right now we're doing cross-examination and commissioners are asking questions, and you'll have a chance to make a final argument.
I'm trying to respond to his question.
But he doesn't, there's no question before us. He didn't make a question yet.
Well, I believe he raised the issue also of, would we meet to mitigate this? And I would like to address that. Was that a...
Do you have another question for this witness?
No, I've got a point to make, and my point is this. I believe we will weigh all the facts, all the information that is in front of us before we come to a final decision on this.
Seth, I think you have questions.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Of John Talty, is that correct? Is that? I think you had said that the building would start in about 2014. I do appreciate how you did break that down, because in the other documents it did say that it would be going spring to spring, spring to spring, spring to spring, and it really stood out that it was going to be 20 years of straight construction. So I think we all in the room appreciated seeing that schedule, because I know that I think we would all be pretty distressed with 20 years of straight construction.
Agreed.
You did say that in terms of the skins and the material, that the Plan Commission, this committee here, and the city would play a role in determining what materials you use. I don't think we do play any type of role in that. So could you please clarify that? Because
I think the intent of my comment was simply the fact that you have to accept or approve the design concept that we come up with, and so that you too play a part in this process.
Oh, excuse me, but Mr. Peters, if we approved here today, we've not seen materials. So